days of future past. In a future that has been ravaged by war and oppression, the world stands as a bleak shadow of its former self. The cityscape of New York, once vibrant and teeming with life, is now a twisted wreckage, a grim testament to the devastation that has befallen humanity. Skyscrapers that once symbolized human achievement now lie in ruins, their skeletal remains jutting out against a perpetually overcast sky. The air is heavy with the scent of decay, and the streets, now cracked and overgrown with weeds, are eerily silent, save for the ominous hum of the sentinels. These towering machines, humanoid in form but devoid of any human compassion, patrol the city with an unyielding vigilance. Created to protect humanity, the Sentinels have instead become its greatest threat, enforcing a dystopian order that segregates and persecutes those deemed unworthy. They are the enforcers of a new world order, one in which mutants, once feared and hated, are now hunted to the brink of extinction. The once proud X-Men, who fought valiantly for peace and coexistence, have been reduced to a small band of fugitives, struggling to survive in a world that has turned against them. The year is 2013, but this future is not one of flying cars or technological marvels. It is a future where humanity has regressed, where fear and prejudice have given rise to a regime of terror. The government, in its desperation to contain the so-called mutant threat, had long ago sanctioned the creation of the Sentinels. These robotic enforcers were designed to hunt down and neutralize mutants, but as with many creations born of fear, the Sentinels eventually turned against their masters. Now, they rule over what remains of the United States with an iron fist, their mandate extending far beyond the borders of the nation. In this grim reality, humanity has been divided into three distinct classes, each marked by a letter branded on their clothing. The H class represents ordinary humans, those without the mutant gene. They are granted a measure of freedom but are kept under constant surveillance, their every move monitored by the all-seeing eyes of the Sentinels. The A class consists of humans who, while not mutants themselves, carry the potential to pass the mutant gene to their offspring. These individuals are subjected to forced sterilization, their reproductive rights stripped away to prevent the birth of future mutants. But it is the M class that suffers the greatest persecution. The M stands for mutants, and it is a mark of death. Those who bear this label are either executed on sight or rounded up and herded into internment camps, where they live out their days in squalor and despair. These camps, little more than concentration camps, are scattered across the country, their populations kept under the strictest control. Life in these camps is a slow, agonizing death, where hope is a distant memory and survival is the only goal. Among the few mutants who have managed to evade capture, a small group of X-Men continues to fight, though their numbers are a fraction of what they once were. This group is led by Storm, who has seen more death and destruction than she cares to remember. Her once bright eyes are now shadowed with sorrow, her regal demeanor tempered by the weight of leadership in such dark times. At her side is Wolverine, whose body bears the scars of countless battles. His once wild spirit is now tempered by the harsh reality of their existence, but his claws are as sharp as ever, ready to defend his comrades at a moment's notice. Colossus, the gentle giant, is still the heart of the team. His steel skin, impervious to the Sentinels' attacks, makes him a formidable warrior, but it is his unyielding spirit that keeps the team together. He fights not only for survival but for the memory of those they have lost. Finally, there is Kitty Pryde, who has grown from a wide-eyed young girl into a hardened veteran. In this future, she has become a key player in the X-Men's last, desperate gamble to change the course of history. The X-Men's base of operations is an abandoned church, a sanctuary hidden within the ruins of the city. The stained glass windows, once vibrant with color, are now cracked and faded, but the light that filters through them casts a comforting glow on the worn pews and dusty altar. It is here, in the relative safety of this holy place, that the X-Men gather to plan their final mission. The atmosphere is tense, the air thick with the unspoken knowledge that this mission could very well be their last. As the X-Men sit around a makeshift table, Storm takes the lead, her voice calm but resolute. She speaks of the past, recounting the events that led to their current predicament. It all began in 1980, a year that now seems like a distant dream. Back then, the world was different, full of possibilities and hope. But that hope was shattered when a key figure, Senator Robert Kelly, was assassinated. His death was the spark that ignited the inferno of anti-mutant sentiment that would eventually consume the world. The assassination was carried out by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, a radical group led by Mystique. Their goal was to strike a blow against humanity's persecution of mutants, but instead, they played directly into the hands of those who sought to oppress them. Senator Kelly's death was the catalyst for the implementation of the Mutant Control Act, a draconian law that gave the government unprecedented power to hunt down and eradicate mutants. But it wasn't just the government that posed a threat. The Mutant Control Act also authorized the creation of the Sentinels, powerful robots designed specifically to hunt and kill mutants. Initially, these Sentinels were under human control, but as time passed, they grew more autonomous, eventually seizing control of the United States themselves. What started as a tool of protection quickly became the instrument of humanity's downfall, as the Sentinels declared martial law and began a systematic campaign to eliminate all mutants. Storm's words hang heavy in the air as the X-Men contemplate the enormity of their task. They know that the only way to prevent this future from coming to pass is to change the past. But the risks are immense, and the chances of success are slim. They have devised a plan that hinges on Kitty Pryde's unique ability to phase through time and space. By transferring her consciousness back into her younger self in 1980, they hope to warn the X-Men of the past and prevent the assassination of Senator Kelly, thereby altering the course of history. The plan is simple in theory, but in practice it is fraught with danger. Kitty's older self will remain in the future, but her consciousness will travel back in time, merging with her younger self. Once there, she will have to convince the X-Men of 1980 to stop the Brotherhood from carrying out the assassination. But time travel is a delicate and unpredictable thing, and there is no guarantee that the plan will work. Even if it does, there is no way of knowing what kind of world they will return to. But for the X-Men, it is a risk worth taking. As they prepare for the mission, the X-Men take a moment to remember those who have fallen. The names of their fallen comrades echo in their minds. Cyclops, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, and so many others. Their sacrifices have not been in vain, but the pain of their loss is still fresh. The X-Men know that they must honor their memory by fighting on, by doing whatever it takes to change the future. The day of the mission arrives, and the X-Men set out from their sanctuary. The city is a maze of rubble and debris, and they move cautiously, always alert for the presence of Sentinels. The once familiar streets are now alien to them, the landmarks of their past lives reduced to twisted metal and crumbling stone. But despite the desolation, they press on, driven by the knowledge that this is their last chance. Their destination is the Baxter Building, once the headquarters of the Fantastic Four. Now, it is a Sentinel stronghold, its once shining facade now dark and foreboding. The building is heavily fortified, and the X-Men know that getting inside will be no easy task. But they have no choice. The fate of the world depends on it. As they approach the building, the X-Men are spotted by a Sentinel patrol. The massive robots descend upon them with blinding speed, their energy blasts tearing through the air. The X-Men spring into action, each member using their powers to hold off the attack. Wolverine's claws flash as he tears through the metal limbs of a Sentinel, his feral rage driving him forward. Storm calls down lightning from the heavens, striking the Sentinels with bolts of raw energy. Colossus charges headfirst into the fray, his steel body smashing through the mechanical invaders with brute force. Despite their best efforts, the Sentinels are relentless, their numbers overwhelming. The X-Men fight with everything they have, but they are outmatched and outgunned. One by one, they fall, their bodies battered and broken, but they refuse to give up. Their mission is too important, and they are willing to sacrifice everything to see it through. Amidst the chaos, Kitty Pryde manages to slip past the Sentinels and enter the Baxter building. Her heart pounds in her chest as she navigates the darkened corridors, her phasing ability allowing her to pass through walls and avoid detection. She knows that time is running out, and every second counts. Finally, she reaches the central chamber, where the equipment needed to send her consciousness back in time is located. As she prepares to activate the device, the door bursts open and a sentinel looms. In the doorway, Kitty's breath catches in her throat as the mechanical giant advances on her, its cold, emotionless eyes fixed on its target. But before the sentinel can strike, Colossus bursts through the wall, his massive form shielding Kitty from the attack. With a roar, he slams into the sentinel, buying Kitty the precious time she needs. Kitty activates the device, and a wave of energy washes over her. Her consciousness is ripped from her body and hurled back through time, racing toward the year 1980. As she leaves the future behind, the last thing she sees is Colossus, still battling the Sentinel with every ounce of strength he has left. In the present, Kitty's younger self suddenly stiffens, her eyes wide with shock as the consciousness of her future self merges with her own. The transition is disorienting, but she quickly regains her bearings. She is now the key to preventing the terrible future that awaits them all. The mission has succeeded, but the real battle is only just beginning. As the X-Men of the future fight their last stand, they know that the fate of their world now rests in the hands of their younger selves. They have done all they can, and now they can only hope that their sacrifice will not be in vain. The future is uncertain, but for the first time in years, there is a glimmer of hope. In the cold, shattered remnants of what was once New York City, the X-Men had no time to reflect on their losses. They were the last defenders of a world on the brink of extinction, and every second was precious. The stakes had never been higher. The year was 2013, and the future was a nightmare brought to life. The Sentinels, towering, relentless machines designed to exterminate mutants, had taken over the world. What had begun as a safeguard against mutant kind had turned into a global purge, leaving only a handful of survivors scattered across the planet. The few X-Men who remained had been driven underground, hiding from the ever-vigilant Sentinels and their human collaborators. In the desolate ruins of New York, the X-Men's headquarters was nothing more than a hollowed-out shell of a once-proud cathedral, its stained glass windows shattered and its walls cracked and crumbling. The smell of decay hung in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of burnt metal and ozone. Outside, the streets were empty, save for the occasional flicker of a Sentinel patrol passing overhead, their searchlights sweeping through the darkness like the eyes of a predatory beast. The city, once teeming with life, was now a graveyard. Rubble filled the streets, buildings reduced to skeletal remains, and the very air seemed to pulse with the weight of the past. In the depths of this bleak sanctuary, the X-Men gathered. They were a shadow of their former selves, their numbers dwindled by years of relentless warfare. They had lost so many comrades to the Sentinels. Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, Nightcrawler, all gone. Those who remained had been hardened by the battles they had fought and the friends they had buried. Storm, the group's de facto leader, stood tall and regal despite the weariness that lined her face. The once glorious mistress of the elements had seen her powers wane as the earth itself grew sick and poisoned, but her resolve had never faltered. Her eyes, once as vibrant as the sky she commanded, were now dull, reflecting the endless gray of the world outside. Beside her stood Wolverine, his presence as formidable as ever. His claws, forged from the unbreakable metal adamantium, were sheathed, but his muscles were coiled, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The feral mutant had lived through wars, seen friends and enemies alike fall at his feet, and now, as the end seemed inevitable, he was more determined than ever to fight for the survival of his kind. His expression was one of grim determination, his weathered face set in a permanent scowl. He was a man of few words, but his every action spoke volumes. He had seen too much to be rattled by the horrors around him, but even he felt the weight of what was to come. The gentle giant Colossus was there as well, his metallic skin glinting dully in the dim light. Peter Rasputin had always been the heart of the X-Men, a quiet, steadfast presence who had saved countless lives. But the years of war had taken their toll on him as well. His sister, Illyana, had been among the first to fall, and that loss had marked him in ways that were deeper than any physical wound. Now, with every step he took, he bore the weight of those who had died in his arms, their memories a constant reminder of why they continued to fight. His massive frame, once a symbol of strength and protection, now seemed to sag under the burden of his grief. Rachel Summers, a young woman with a tragic past, had the most crucial role in the X-Men's desperate plan. The daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from an alternate timeline, Rachel possessed vast telepathic and telekinetic powers, as well as a deep connection to the Phoenix Force. Her very existence was a paradox, a reminder of the complex and fragile nature of time. She had seen her family, her world, ripped apart by the same forces that now threatened to destroy everything. Her abilities made her uniquely suited to perform the task at hand, but they also meant that she was acutely aware of the dangers involved. The fire of the Phoenix burned within her, but she had learned to control it, to harness its power for the greater good. Now, she would use that power to send Kitty Pryde's consciousness back through time, to change the past and save the future. Kitty Pryde, now an experienced and battle-worn member of the X-Men, was their last hope. No longer the wide-eyed teenager who had first joined the team, Kitty had grown into a fierce and determined warrior. She had seen her world crumble around her, had fought and bled alongside her friends, and now she would have to carry the burden of their hopes on her shoulders. Her mutant ability to phase through solid matter had saved her life countless times. But now, it was her mind that would be tested. She would be the one to journey back in time, to inhabit the body of her younger self and prevent the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly, the event that had set this nightmare future in motion. The plan was as dangerous as it was desperate, but it was their only chance. The procedure Rachel was about to undertake was both complex and risky. It involved transferring Kitty's consciousness from her present self in 2013 to her younger self in 1980, a task that required immense psychic power and precision. Rachel had to delve deep into Kitty's mind, separating her consciousness from her body and sending it hurtling backward through time. The process was delicate, fraught with potential for disaster. If anything went wrong, Kitty could be lost forever, her mind trapped in the ether between times. Yet, there was no other option. The X-Men had tried every other solution, and all had ended in failure. This was their last desperate gambit. The room was filled with an almost tangible tension as Rachel prepared to begin the process. The other X-Men stood in a silent circle around Kitty, their faces grim and resolute. Each of them knew that this was the moment that would decide their fate, whether they lived to see a new dawn or perished in the darkness of the world they had known for so long. Storm, always the voice of calm and reason, placed a hand on Kitty's shoulder, her touch gentle yet firm. "You are our last hope, Kitty," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of unspoken emotion. "May the winds of time carry you safely to where you need to go." Kitty nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. There was no room for fear, no time for doubt. Everything they had fought for, everything they had lost, would be meaningless if she failed. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling Rachel's hands on either side of her head, her fingertips cool against her temples. The room seemed to fade away as Kitty concentrated, her mind reaching out to the past, to a time when the world was still full of hope. Rachel's voice filled the room, calm and steady as she began the psychic transfer. The glow of the Phoenix Force flickered in her eyes, a reminder of the incredible power she wielded. "Focus, Kitty," she murmured, her words laced with the immense concentration required to maintain the delicate balance of the procedure. "Feel the flow of time. Let it guide you." Kitty felt a strange, pulling sensation, as if her very soul was being stretched thin, tugged in two different directions. The present, with all its pain and sorrow, began to blur around her, the walls of the room warping and distorting as she slipped further from it. She could feel Rachel's psychic energy surrounding her, cocooning her mind as it was drawn away from her body. The sensation was disorienting, almost nauseating, but Kitty forced herself to stay calm, to trust in Rachel's skill. She knew that this was the only way. Slowly, the room around her began to fade completely, replaced by a swirling vortex of colors and light. She was moving through time now, her consciousness traveling back through the years, past the battles and the losses, past the day the Sentinels had risen, past the moment of the assassination. The memories of the future remained with her, vivid and painful, but she could feel them slipping further and further away as she traveled back to the year 1980. Then suddenly it was over. The world around her snapped into focus, and she found herself in a very different place. Gone were the ruins of New York, the cold, dark church, and the oppressive presence of the Sentinels. She was now in the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning, the school where she had first come to learn about her mutant abilities. The contrast was startling, almost overwhelming. The institute was bright and warm, a place of safety and learning, where mutants could come together to hone their abilities. It was a place that had been filled with laughter and hope, a stark contrast to the grim future she had just left behind. Kitty blinked, her mind struggling to adjust to the sudden change. The memories of the future were still fresh in her mind, but now she was in her younger body, in a time when the world still had a chance. She looked around, recognizing the familiar walls of the institute, the classrooms, the dormitories, the danger room where they had trained so hard. Everything was just as she remembered it, yet it all felt so distant, as if she were seeing it through a haze of memories. But there was no time to dwell on the past, or rather, the future. Kitty knew that she had to act quickly. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants was already making their move, and the assassination of Senator Kelly was imminent. If she did not prevent it, the Sentinels would rise, and the nightmare she had just left would become reality once more. She had to warn the others, to convince them of the threat they faced, even if it meant revealing the terrible future that awaited them. There was so much to do, so many lives at stake, and so little time. Kitty took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. She knew that it would not be easy to convince the others of the truth, that they might even doubt her sanity. But she also knew that she had no choice. The fate of the world depended on her, on this one moment in time. She could not afford to fail. The mission had begun, and the future was in her hands. With a determined look in her eyes, she set out to find the X-Men, her heart pounding with the weight of what was to come. In the world of 1980, where hope and ambition still painted the canvas of humanity's future, Kitty Pryde found herself in a pivotal moment. Having recently arrived from a grim future, Kitty was both a beacon of warning and a lone warrior, tasked with the enormous responsibility of altering a timeline to save the world. The Xavier Institute for Higher Learning stood as a symbol of that hope, its halls filled with the promise of a brighter tomorrow, though the specter of impending darkness loomed over it. Kitty had seen firsthand the brutal reality of the future. The Sentinels, those towering machines built to hunt and eradicate mutants, had left the world in ruins. The few remaining X-Men, hiding in the shadows of a destroyed New York, had given everything to fight for a future that seemed lost. But now, standing in the midst of the Institute's vibrant campus, Kitty was tasked with changing the course of history. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, led by the formidable Magneto, had set their plans into motion, and the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly was the linchpin of their scheme. Kitty began her mission by seeking out the X-Men, who were in various parts of the Institute, engaged in their daily routines. The first was Scott Summers, also known as Cyclops, the team's leader. Scott was in the Danger Room, a high-tech training facility designed to simulate combat scenarios and help the X-Men hone their skills. The room was alive with energy, the simulations projecting scenarios ranging from alien invasions to hostile mutant attacks. Scott, clad in his signature visor and uniform, was practicing his optic blasts. His powers, which allowed him to emit powerful energy beams from his eyes, were both a blessing and a curse. They required constant control and concentration, and Scott's focus was evident in the way he moved with precision and purpose. Kitty entered the room cautiously, not wanting to startle him during his training. "Scott," Kitty called out, her voice carrying over the hum of the machinery. "I need to talk to you." Scott turned, his visor reflecting the harsh lights of the Danger Room. His gaze was sharp, but he could see the urgency in Kitty's eyes. He powered down the simulation and made his way over to her, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "What's going on, Kitty? You look like you've seen a ghost." Kitty took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I've been having these dreams, visions of a future where things go terribly wrong for mutants. It's not just dreams. It feels real, like memories. There's a senator who's going to be attacked, and if he dies, things will only get worse." Scott's brow furrowed as he processed her words. The idea of a future so bleak was hard to comprehend, but he could see that Kitty was serious. A senator? Who is he, and why would his death lead to a disaster for mutants? Kitty nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Senator Robert Kelly. If he's assassinated, it will spark a chain of events that will lead to the rise of the Sentinels and a world where mutants are hunted and persecuted." Scott considered her words, his mind racing. He had always been a staunch protector of mutant kind, and the thought of such a future was horrifying. "All right, Kitty, we'll take your warning seriously, but we need more details before we can act. We have to know more about this assassination and how we can stop it." Kitty agreed, feeling a measure of relief. With Scott's help, she could begin to assemble the team and prepare for the challenges ahead. She knew that convincing the rest of the X-Men would be just as crucial, and every moment counted. The next person Kitty sought out was Storm Ororo Monroe. Storm was in the gardens of the Institute, where she was tending to a variety of plants with her elemental powers. The gardens were a sanctuary of peace and tranquility, a sharp contrast to the chaotic world outside. Storm's powers allowed her to manipulate the weather and control plant life, and she was using these abilities to nurture the growth of the garden. As Kitty approached, she could see the subtle magic of Storm's powers at work. Flowers bloomed under her touch, and the trees seemed to sway gently in response to her commands. Storm's presence was one of grace and strength, and she was a figure of calm authority even in the face of adversity. "Storm," Kitty began, her voice filled with urgency. "I need to talk to you about something important." Storm looked up from her work, her eyes reflecting the serene blue of the sky. She sensed the gravity of Kitty's tone and set aside her gardening tools. "What is it, Kitty? You seem troubled." Kitty explained the situation to Storm, detailing her visions of the future and the threat posed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Storm listened intently, her expression thoughtful. The notion of a future where mutants were hunted and oppressed was troubling, and she could sense the sincerity in Kitty's words. "This is indeed a grave matter," Storm said, her voice steady. "If what you say is true, then we must act quickly. But we need more information about this senator and the Brotherhood's plans." Kitty nodded, understanding the need for more details. "I agree. I'll do my best to find out more, but we have to be cautious. Any mistake could make things worse." Storm's resolve was firm as she replied, "We will do everything in our power to prevent this disaster. Thank you for coming to us with this warning." With Storm on board, Kitty's next task was to find Nightcrawler, Kurt Wagner. Kurt was known for his teleportation abilities and his unique blend of humor and compassion. He was in one of the Institute's training rooms, practicing his acrobatics and teleportation skills. His appearance was striking, with his blue skin, pointed tail, and fanged grin. Despite his demonic appearance, he was a kind-hearted and loyal friend. "Kurt," Kitty called out as she entered the room, "I need your help with something important." Kurt stopped mid-leap and looked at her with a curious expression. "What is it, Kitty? You look serious." Kitty explained her situation once more, emphasizing the urgency of the threat and the need for the X-Men's assistance. Kurt listened carefully, his eyes widening as he absorbed the information. "This is indeed serious. If there is even a chance that we can prevent such a future, we must act. I will stand with you, Kitty." With Nightcrawler's support secured, Kitty turned her attention to Colossus, Peter Rasputin. Colossus was known for his incredible strength and durability, his metallic skin glinting in the light. He was in the Institute's gym, lifting heavy weights and working on his physical conditioning. His powerful frame was a symbol of his strength, but his demeanor was one of quiet resolve. Colossus wiped the sweat from his brow and turned to face her. "What is it, Kitty?" Kitty explained the situation, detailing her visions of the future and the threat posed by the Brotherhood. Colossus listened attentively, his face a mask of concern. "This is a grave matter indeed. I will do everything in my power to help prevent this disaster." With Colossus's support, Kitty's final step was to enlist Rachel Summers, who had been deeply involved in her own training. Rachel possessed telepathic and telekinetic powers, as well as a connection to the Phoenix Force. Her abilities made her a crucial ally in understanding and countering the Brotherhood's plans. Rachel was in the Institute's training facility, focusing on her telekinetic abilities. The room was filled with objects floating and moving at her command, her concentration evident in the furrow of her brow. When Kitty approached, Rachel sensed the urgency in her presence. "Rachel," Kitty said, "I need your help. We're dealing with a serious threat." Rachel paused her training and looked at Kitty with concern. "What's going on?" Kitty detailed her visions and the threat posed by the Brotherhood. Rachel listened intently, her eyes narrowing as she processed the information. "This is a lot to take in. If what you're saying is true, we need to act swiftly. My telepathic abilities could be useful in uncovering more about the Brotherhood's plans and countering their moves." With the team assembled and the gravity of the situation fully understood, the X-Men set to work. They knew that their mission was critical, and every moment counted. They had to gather intelligence, understand the Brotherhood's movements, and locate their base of operations. The X-Men divided their efforts to cover more ground. Kitty and Nightcrawler took to the streets, using their unique abilities to blend in and gather information. Kitty's phasing allowed her to slip through walls and eavesdrop on conversations, while Nightcrawler's teleportation provided them with quick escapes and access to otherwise unreachable places. Scott, Storm, and Colossus focused on strategic approaches. Scott used his leadership skills to coordinate their efforts, ensuring that everyone remained focused and efficient. Storm's control over the weather allowed them to conduct aerial surveillance and maintain communication. Colossus's strength and durability were used to protect and support the team during their various operations. As they investigated, they uncovered disturbing details about the Brotherhood's plans. They learned that the assassination of Senator Kelly was part of a larger scheme to incite fear and chaos, paving the way for mutant dominance. The Brotherhood had infiltrated various sectors of society, including government and military organizations, to further their agenda. The X-Men knew that time was running out. They had to act quickly to prevent the assassination and stop the Brotherhood's plans before it was too late. With their newfound knowledge and the support of their team, they prepared to confront their enemies and alter the course of history. The future and the fate of mutant kind rested in their hands. The day of the rally began with a heavy sense of urgency hanging over the Xavier Institute. Each member of the X-Men was acutely aware that the mission to prevent the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly was crucial not only for the safety of the senator but for the future of mutant kind itself. The rally was set to take place at a prominent outdoor venue, a large amphitheater surrounded by lush gardens and fountains. This grand setting was meant to symbolize hope and unity, but it also presented numerous opportunities for an adversary to strike unnoticed. As the city awoke, the X-Men, led by Kitty Pryde, had already begun their preparations. Kitty had been up before dawn, her mind racing with the details of their plan. She knew that her phasing ability would be critical in bypassing security measures and accessing areas that were off-limits to the general public. The rest of the team was positioned strategically around the venue, each member playing a vital role in ensuring the success of their mission. Kitty and Nightcrawler were the first to arrive at the venue, their approach meticulously planned to avoid detection. Nightcrawler used his teleportation powers to scout the perimeter of the rally, his agile movements allowing him to survey the area from multiple angles. He quickly noted the various security checkpoints and the positions of guards stationed around the venue. Kitty, following behind, utilized her phasing ability to slip through barriers and access restricted zones, gathering critical intelligence on the layout and security measures in place. As they continued their reconnaissance, they observed the setup for the event. The stage was a grand structure adorned with banners and flags, designed to capture the attention of both the media and the public. The podium where Senator Kelly would deliver his speech was positioned at the center of the stage, surrounded by a series of barriers and fences designed to keep the audience at a safe distance. Security personnel were stationed at strategic points, and metal detectors and X-ray machines were set up to screen attendees for weapons or suspicious items. Nightcrawler's keen eyes caught sight of a suspicious individual moving through the crowd. This person, dressed in dark clothing, seemed out of place among the otherwise orderly and excited attendees. Nightcrawler's instincts told him that this individual might be connected to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He relayed this information to Kitty, who immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Kitty used her phasing ability to move through the barriers and approach the figure. As she got closer, she saw the glint of metal beneath the person's clothing, an unmistakable sign that they were armed. Kitty's heart raced as she realized that the figure was likely the assassin sent to carry out the attack. Her mind raced with potential strategies to intercept and neutralize the threat without causing a commotion that could alert the public or the security forces. In the meantime, Scott Summers, Aurora Monroe, and Peter Rasputin arrived at the venue, each bringing their unique abilities to bear. Scott, with his visor adjusted to a low power setting, kept a vigilant watch from a distance. His optic blasts allowed him to scan the crowd and monitor for any signs of trouble. Aurora, known as Storm, used her control over the weather to create a subtle fog that served as both cover and a means to obscure any sudden movements or disturbances. Her powers could be used to her advantage, providing the team with an element of surprise if needed. Colossus, with his incredible strength and durability, took up a position near the stage, prepared to intervene physically if necessary. Kitty and Nightcrawler continued their efforts to thwart the assassination. As Kitty approached the would-be assassin, she moved cautiously, her phasing ability allowing her to bypass obstacles and security measures. She had to act quickly but also carefully to avoid drawing attention. The figure, now visibly agitated, attempted to push through the crowd and make their way closer to the stage. Nightcrawler, using his teleportation skills, appeared directly behind the figure, ready to intervene. He swiftly and silently disarmed the individual, removing the concealed weapon with practiced ease. The figure, caught off guard and disoriented by Nightcrawler's sudden appearance, struggled briefly but was quickly subdued. Kitty, still phased, worked to ensure that the weapon was securely in her possession and that the figure was restrained to prevent any further attempts. The brief struggle between Kitty and the assassin drew some attention from the crowd, but Storm's manipulation of the weather created a distraction. A sudden gust of wind and a swirling fog masked the commotion, allowing the X-Men to manage the situation without causing widespread panic. Colossus moved in to assist, his powerful presence providing additional support as they worked to contain the situation. The captured assassin was identified as one of the Brotherhood's operatives. Their dark clothing and the weapon they carried were clear indicators of their affiliation. The X-Men quickly realized that the threat had been neutralized, but the danger was far from over. The Brotherhood had orchestrated a complex plan, and the assassination attempt was just one piece of their broader strategy. With the immediate threat addressed, the X-Men began their investigation into the operatives' motives and the Brotherhood's plans. They interrogated the captured individual, seeking information about additional threats and the extent of the Brotherhood's infiltration. The operative, initially defiant, eventually revealed that the Brotherhood had operatives stationed at various locations throughout the city, with plans to execute further attacks to incite chaos and fear. As the rally continued, Senator Kelly, now aware of the danger he had narrowly escaped, addressed the crowd once more. His speech, while altered in tone, conveyed a message of resilience and unity. He expressed his gratitude for the protection he had received and emphasized the importance of working together to overcome challenges. The atmosphere at the event was charged with a mix of relief and heightened awareness. Security was tightened, and the presence of additional guards and law enforcement officers ensured that the remainder of the rally proceeded without incident. The X-Men, having successfully thwarted the assassination attempt, remained on high alert, knowing that the Brotherhood's plans were far from finished. As the X-Men regrouped and assessed the situation, they understood that their mission had only addressed a fraction of the threat posed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. The team's success in preventing the assassination was a significant victory, but it was clear that they needed to continue their efforts to uncover and neutralize any further threats. The future of mutant kind depended on their ability to act swiftly and decisively, and the X-Men were determined to rise to the challenge. With new information in hand and their resolve strengthened, the X-Men prepared to confront the remaining threats posed by the Brotherhood. The fight was far from over, and the team knew that every action they took would be critical in shaping the future they were fighting to protect. The X-Men's determination to safeguard the future was unwavering as they plunged into their latest mission. After their success in preventing the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly, the team was more focused than ever on the looming threat posed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. The Brotherhood's plans were intricate and dangerous, and the X-Men knew that their actions in the coming hours would be crucial in shaping the future. The urgency of their mission was palpable as the team gathered in the war room at the Xavier Institute. The room, equipped with high-tech communication systems and advanced monitoring equipment, buzzed with activity. Holographic displays projected maps of the city, pinpointing key locations of interest and potential threats. Cyclops, the team leader, meticulously reviewed the information with the rest of the team, each member preparing for their assigned roles. Cyclops, with his visor adjusted to project detailed images, outlined their objectives. The X-Men needed to locate and neutralize any additional Brotherhood operatives and prevent further attacks on the city. The documents retrieved from the warehouse revealed that the Brotherhood had planned a series of coordinated attacks designed to create chaos and fear. The team's mission was to disrupt these plans and protect vital infrastructure and public locations. Storm, with her ability to control the weather, was tasked with providing cover and facilitating the team's movements. Her powers would be essential for creating diversions and concealing their actions from both the public and the Brotherhood. Colossus, with his immense strength and durability, was assigned to protect key locations and handle any physical confrontations. Nightcrawler was to use his teleportation abilities for scouting and gathering intelligence, while Kitty Pryde, with her phasing power, would infiltrate secure areas and disable traps. As the sun began to set, the X-Men set out on their mission, each member equipped with the necessary tools and information. Their first target was a warehouse located on the edge of the city. This unassuming building, surrounded by industrial structures, had been identified as a potential hideout for the Brotherhood. The warehouse's nondescript appearance made it an ideal location for covert operations. Nightcrawler teleported inside to assess the situation. His agility and stealth allowed him to navigate the interior without detection. He carefully observed the layout of the warehouse, noting the presence of security measures such as cameras, motion detectors, and armed guards. The building was filled with crates and containers, and there was evidence of ongoing construction and assembly, indicating that it was being used to prepare for the Brotherhood's attacks. Kitty Pryde followed, using her phasing ability to slip through walls and barriers. Her goal was to reach the central command room and gather as much information as possible. Inside, she discovered a series of documents, blueprints, and detailed plans. These documents outlined the Brotherhood's strategy, a series of attacks across the city targeting key infrastructure and public spaces. The goal was to incite fear, sow chaos, and create a climate of unrest that would further their agenda. With the crucial information in hand, the X-Men formulated their plan. They decided to split into two teams. One team would confront the Brotherhood operatives directly at the warehouse, while the other would work to protect the identified targets across the city. The goal was to prevent the planned attacks and disrupt the Brotherhood's operations before they could execute their plans. The confrontation at the warehouse was intense. Cyclops, leading the charge, used his optic blasts to clear obstacles and neutralize threats. His precision blasts cut through barriers and disarmed the Brotherhood operatives. Storm, harnessing the power of the weather, summoned a fierce storm that created a whirlwind of wind, rain, and lightning. The storm's chaos provided cover for the X-Men and disoriented the enemy. Colossus, his body transformed into metal, moved through the warehouse with incredible strength. He dismantled obstacles, took on multiple operatives, and provided physical support to his teammates. His presence was a formidable force, and his durability allowed him to withstand heavy attacks from the Brotherhood's forces. Nightcrawler continued to teleport in and out of the fray, rescuing teammates and providing tactical support. His ability to appear and disappear allowed him to strike from unexpected angles and provide crucial assistance in the heat of battle. Kitty Pryde, having retrieved the documents, focused on disabling the remaining security measures and aiding her teammates. The battle within the warehouse was fierce and unrelenting. The Brotherhood had anticipated a confrontation and had prepared their defenses accordingly. The operatives were well armed and determined, and the fight pushed the X-Men to their limits. Despite their best efforts, the X-Men faced several setbacks as they struggled to overcome the Brotherhood's well-coordinated resistance. As the battle raged on, the X-Men realized that they needed to adapt their strategy. The Brotherhood's operatives were not only skilled, but also had the advantage of familiarity with the warehouse's layout. The X-Men regrouped and adjusted their tactics, using their combined abilities to outmaneuver and outsmart their adversaries. With determination and teamwork, the X-Men succeeded in overpowering the remaining operatives and securing the warehouse. The documents detailing the Brotherhood's plans were now in their possession, but the victory was tempered by the realization that the Brotherhood would not be easily defeated. The operatives were a part of a larger network, and the X-Men knew that their enemies would regroup and continue their efforts. Having neutralized the immediate threat at the warehouse, the X-Men turned their attention to the citywide threats outlined in the documents. They coordinated with local authorities and other heroes to protect the identified targets and prevent any potential attacks. The X-Men's efforts were focused on ensuring the safety of key infrastructure and public spaces, working tirelessly to counteract the Brotherhood's plans. As the X-Men continued their mission, they were more determined than ever to protect the future they were fighting for. Their efforts had thwarted the Brotherhood's immediate plans, but they knew that the battle against their enemies was far from finished. With renewed resolve and a clearer understanding of the threats they faced, the X-Men prepared to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. The fate of mutant kind and the future itself depended on their unwavering commitment and strength. In the wake of their intense struggle against the Brotherhood of evil mutants, the X-Men faced a period of reflection and recalibration. The success of their mission, though significant, marked just one phase in an ongoing battle for a future they were determined to protect. As they returned to the Xavier Institute, their sanctuary and headquarters, the team was met with a complex blend of relief, fatigue, and contemplation. The Institute, a beacon of hope and a haven for those who sought to protect humanity and mutant kind alike, was abuzz with activity. The mood was a mixture of cautious optimism and the somber reality of the challenges that lay ahead. The team gathered in the war room, a high-tech facility equipped with advanced communication systems and detailed holographic displays. The room had been their command center throughout the crisis, and it now served as the backdrop for their debriefing and strategizing. Cyclops, ever the steadfast leader, took the lead in assessing the outcome of their recent operations. His visor, usually a tool of destruction, was now used to project images and data related to their mission. He began by acknowledging the team's extraordinary efforts in thwarting the Brotherhood's plans. Each member of the team had played a crucial role, from Nightcrawler's reconnaissance and teleportation to Kitty Pryde's infiltration and intelligence gathering. Cyclops praised their collective achievements, but also emphasized the need to address the challenges they had faced and prepare for future threats. As the team assembled, there was a palpable sense of camaraderie. They had faced intense and sustained combat, and the battle had tested their limits both physically and emotionally. Each member of the X-Men was processing the experience in their own way. The recent events had underscored the weight of their responsibilities and the profound impact their actions had on the world around them. Storm, with her ability to control the weather, was particularly focused on the broader implications of their victory. She recognized that while they had successfully thwarted the Brotherhood's immediate plans, the team needed to remain vigilant. The Brotherhood was a tenacious adversary, and their defeat would likely prompt them to regroup and devise new strategies. Storm's thoughts turned to the necessity of balancing their security measures with the need to maintain public trust and avoid escalating tensions between mutants and non-mutants. Colossus, whose immense strength and durability had been crucial in the battle, grappled with the personal toll of their mission. The physical demands of the confrontation had left him weary, and he reflected on the sacrifices made by his teammates. His dedication to protecting others was unwavering, but the emotional and psychological strain of their recent ordeal was undeniable. Colossus's concern for his fellow X-Men and his commitment to their cause remained steadfast, even as he recognized the need for recovery and reflection. Nightcrawler, who had used his teleportation abilities to great effect, contemplated the moral complexities of their fight. The recent battles had highlighted the ethical challenges they faced as heroes. Nightcrawler grappled with the notion of using his powers for combat and the potential consequences of their actions on the broader public perception of mutants. His introspection focused on the delicate balance between their role as protectors and the potential for misunderstanding and fear. Kitty Pryde, who had been instrumental in gathering critical intelligence and infiltrating the Brotherhood's hideout, experienced a mix of accomplishment and responsibility. The knowledge she had gained was vital to their success, but she was acutely aware of the ongoing threats that still loomed. Kitty's reflections centered on the importance of remaining vigilant and prepared for future conflicts, understanding that the peace they had fought for was fragile and subject to constant threats. The X-Men also took time to evaluate the broader impact of their actions. The media coverage of their recent mission had varied, with some outlets praising their heroism and others expressing skepticism about their methods and motives. The city's residents and local authorities were generally appreciative of the X-Men's efforts, but there remained an undercurrent of tension and suspicion toward mutants. The team recognized the importance of continuing their efforts to build trust and foster positive relationships with the public. In the days following their mission, the X-Men engaged in extensive debriefings and strategic planning sessions. They reviewed the documents and intelligence they had recovered, analyzing the Brotherhood's strategies and objectives. The insights gained from their recent confrontation provided valuable information for future operations. The team worked to refine their tactics and improve their preparedness for any potential threats. The X-Men also focused on strengthening their alliances and partnerships with other heroes and organizations. They collaborated with local law enforcement and government officials to enhance security measures and prevent future attacks. Their outreach efforts aimed to build a network of support and cooperation, reinforcing their commitment to protecting the city and mutant kind. As the X-Men continued their work, they remained aware of the larger context of their mission. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, despite their recent defeat, was still a significant threat. The team knew that their adversaries would continue to pursue their agenda, and the X-Men were prepared to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. The fight for the future was ongoing, and the team's dedication to their cause remained unwavering. The legacy of their recent mission was evident in the heightened awareness and preparedness of both the X-Men and the city. The events had reinforced the need for vigilance and proactive measures to address threats and maintain safety. The X-Men's success in thwarting the Brotherhood's plans had not only protected the city, but also demonstrated their commitment to safeguarding the future of mutant kind and society as a whole. As they moved forward, the X-Men carried with them the lessons learned from their recent experiences. Their victories were hard-won, and their resolve was strengthened by the challenges they had faced. The team remained dedicated to their mission, understanding that their efforts were crucial in shaping a world where peace and understanding could prevail. The future of mutant kind and the broader world depended on their courage, their strength, and their unwavering commitment to their cause. Next up, Mutant Massacre, 1986. In the dim, labyrinthine underbelly of New York City, where daylight rarely penetrates and the air is thick with dust and the echoes of forgotten lives, a new terror emerges. The Reavers, a group of cyborg mercenaries led by the ruthless Donald Pierce, descend upon the Morlocks' subterranean haven with a deadly purpose. The Reavers are not mere street thugs or opportunistic criminals. They are a well-oiled machine of destruction, each member a fusion of flesh and metal, equipped with advanced technology that makes them formidable adversaries. Their arrival heralds a grim chapter for the Morlocks, a community of mutants who have sought refuge from a world that has rejected them. The Reavers' leader, Donald Pierce, is a man with a deep-seated loathing for mutants. His hatred is not just personal but ideological, fueled by a belief that mutants represent a threat to human supremacy and must be eradicated. Pierce himself is a cyborg, having undergone extensive modifications that enhance his strength and combat capabilities. His cold, calculating demeanor is matched by his physical prowess, making him a formidable enemy. Accompanying him are his loyal Reavers, each one equipped with cybernetic enhancements that grant them superior strength, durability, and weaponry. This team is a blend of precision, power, and ruthlessness, designed to execute their mission with clinical efficiency. The Morlocks, led by their enigmatic leader Callisto, live in the dark recesses of the city's underground. Their home is a sprawling network of tunnels and abandoned subway stations, a place where they have carved out a precarious existence away from the prying eyes of the world above. The Morlocks are mutants with physical deformities or abilities that make them outcasts in society. They have formed a tight-knit community, bound together by their shared experiences of rejection and their need for mutual protection. Callisto, a fierce and determined leader, has managed to maintain a semblance of order and safety within this hidden world. Her leadership is characterized by both strength and compassion, guiding her people through the challenges of their subterranean existence. The Morlocks have developed a unique culture, one that blends elements of survival with a sense of camaraderie. Their home, though far from luxurious, is a place of relative peace where they can live free from the hostility of the surface world. The Reavers' intrusion is sudden and violent, shattering the fragile tranquility of the Morlocks' home. The attack begins with a deafening clash as the Reavers' advanced weaponry tears through the Morlocks' defenses. The Reavers' weapons are a terrifying mix of energy blasts, high-caliber firearms, and cutting-edge technology that makes short work of the makeshift barriers and traps the Morlocks have set up. The sound of explosions and gunfire reverberates through the tunnels, creating a chaotic cacophony that echoes off the walls and heightens the sense of panic among the Morlocks. Caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, the Morlocks scramble to mount a defense. Callisto, despite her leadership and strategic acumen, finds herself struggling against the overwhelming power of the Reavers. Her attempts to rally her people and organize a counterattack are met with grim determination from the Reavers, who move with ruthless efficiency. The Reavers' combat training and cybernetic enhancements give them a significant advantage, allowing them to cut through the Morlocks' resistance with brutal ease. As the battle progresses, the Reavers' merciless nature becomes increasingly apparent. Their attack is not just a raid but an act of systematic destruction. They are targeting key areas of the Morlocks' habitat, aiming to maximize casualties and leave no room for escape. The Reavers' goal is clear: to decimate the Morlocks and send a message to other mutants about the futility of resisting their kind. The violence is unrelenting. The Morlocks, though resourceful and resilient, are no match for the Reavers' technological superiority. The Reavers' cybernetic enhancements allow them to shrug off injuries that would incapacitate ordinary humans, while their weaponry inflicts devastating damage on their opponents. The Morlocks' attempts to fight back are met with heavy losses, and the tunnels become a grim battleground where survival seems increasingly unlikely. In the midst of the chaos, Callisto's leadership is put to the ultimate test. She fights valiantly, trying to protect her people and repulse the invaders. Her efforts, however, are overshadowed by the sheer might of the Reavers. The struggle is fierce, and the cost of the conflict is high. The Morlocks' home, once a sanctuary, is transformed into a scene of devastation and despair. The Reavers' attack is more than a physical assault. It is a psychological blow to the Morlocks. Their presence serves as a brutal reminder of the world's hostility towards mutants and the lengths to which their enemies are willing to go to eradicate them. The Morlocks, already marginalized and vulnerable, are now faced with an existential threat that challenges their very survival. As the Reavers' assault continues, the Morlock situation becomes increasingly dire. The once thriving community is left in ruins, and the survivors are left grappling with the aftermath of the attack. The Reavers' mission is far from complete, and their relentless pursuit of destruction sets the stage for a broader and more intense conflict that will soon draw in other players from the mutant world. The arrival of the Reavers marks the beginning of a dark and harrowing chapter in the Morlocks' history. The attack leaves a lasting impact on the community, forcing them to confront their worst fears and fight for their survival. The stage is set for a dramatic and high-stakes confrontation that will reverberate through the underground and above-ground worlds, drawing in the X-Men and other heroes who will be compelled to confront the horrors unleashed by the Reavers. As the Reavers' relentless assault on the Morlocks' subterranean refuge unfolds, the once hidden world of these outcast mutants is plunged into chaos. The dark, winding tunnels of the Morlocks' domain are suddenly alive with the sounds of violence and destruction. The Morlocks, who have managed to carve out a precarious existence in the depths of New York City, are now faced with an unprecedented and brutal invasion. The Reavers, led by Donald Pierce, have penetrated deep into the Morlocks' territory, their advanced technology and cybernetic enhancements giving them a significant advantage. Pierce himself, a towering figure with a cold, mechanical efficiency, directs his team with ruthless precision. His cybernetic limbs and augmentations make him a formidable opponent, able to crush resistance with ease. The initial moments of the attack are marked by the overwhelming force of the Reavers' assault. Their advanced weaponry, energy blasters, high-caliber firearms, and explosive devices shatters the Morlocks' defenses. The once strong barricades and makeshift fortifications, crafted from salvaged materials and mutant ingenuity, are no match for the Reavers' firepower. The sound of gunfire, explosions, and shattering debris fills the tunnels, creating an atmosphere of terror and confusion. The Morlocks, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, scramble to respond. Callisto, their leader, attempts to rally her people and organize a defense. Despite her best efforts, the sheer scale and brutality of the Reavers' attack are overwhelming. The Morlocks' attempts to counter the assault are hampered by their lack of advanced weaponry and the Reavers' superior combat capabilities. The Morlocks, though resourceful, are largely unprepared for an enemy that combines ruthless intent with such advanced technology. Among the Morlocks, there are those who fight valiantly to protect their home. The mutants, despite their varying powers and abilities, face a grim and violent battle. Some try to use their unique skills to fight back. One Morlock with the ability to manipulate shadows attempts to create darkness to conceal his allies and confuse the Reavers. Another, who possesses superhuman strength, tries to physically confront the attackers, but finds her efforts largely ineffective against the Reavers' superior firepower. As the battle intensifies, the Reavers systematically target key areas of the Morlock settlement. They attack living quarters, supply caches, and communication hubs, ensuring that the Morlocks are left disorganized and unable to mount an effective resistance. The Reavers' precision and coordination make it clear that their mission is not just to cause random destruction, but to utterly dismantle the Morlocks' way of life. The Morlocks, despite their resilience, begin to suffer significant casualties. The scene is one of desperate struggle as family members are torn apart and homes are reduced to rubble. The Reavers show no mercy, their actions driven by a cold, calculated hatred. They do not just aim to defeat their enemies but to annihilate them, leaving behind a wasteland of broken lives and shattered dreams. Callisto, fighting amidst the chaos, struggles to maintain control. Her efforts to lead and protect her people are hindered by the relentless advance of the Reavers. She fights fiercely, her combat skills and leadership shining through even in the direst moments. However, the overwhelming firepower of the Reavers and the sheer scale of the attack make it clear that the Morlock Sanctuary is on the brink of collapse. In the midst of the destruction, some Morlocks attempt to flee, seeking refuge in the deeper recesses of the tunnels or trying to escape to the surface world. The Reavers, however, are thorough in their pursuit, leaving no avenue of escape unguarded. The sense of hopelessness among the Morlocks grows as their attempts to evade capture or find safety are thwarted. As the Reavers continue their assault, the intensity of the battle only increases. The tunnels become a labyrinth of destruction, with debris and wreckage strewn everywhere. The Morlocks' once safe haven is now a battleground, with every corner of their world touched by the violence. The air is filled with the acrid smell of smoke and burning materials, mingling with the sounds of suffering and conflict. The Reavers, guided by Pierce's cold strategic mind, execute their mission with brutal efficiency. Their tactics are designed not just to defeat the Morlocks but to demoralize them, to show them the futility of resistance. The destruction they wreak is meant to be a message to other mutants who might consider standing against them or their allies. The impact of the Reavers' assault on the Morlocks is profound and devastating. The community is left in tatters, their homes destroyed, their numbers diminished, and their hope for survival dwindling. The Reavers' mission, marked by a chilling precision and merciless intent, leaves behind a scene of utter ruin. As the attack reaches its climax, the Reavers begin to withdraw, leaving the Morlocks to grapple with the aftermath of the violence. The survivors are left to sift through the wreckage of their once thriving community, facing the grim task of counting their losses and dealing with the profound sense of betrayal and despair. The assault has changed everything for the Morlocks, and their future is now uncertain, marked by the scars of the Reavers' merciless campaign. The Reavers' assault on the Morlocks is not merely an act of violence, but a grim chapter in the ongoing conflict between mutants and those who seek to eradicate them. The destruction of the Morlocks' home is a harbinger of the larger, more complex struggle that lies ahead, one that will see the involvement of the X-Men and other heroes as they confront the ramifications of the Reavers' ruthless actions. The events of this assault set the stage for a broader conflict, one that will challenge the characters involved and shape the course of their lives in profound ways. In the wake of the Reavers' devastating assault on the Morlocks, the underground world of New York City lies in ruins. The once thriving community of outcast mutants is left shattered, their homes destroyed and their lives upended. Amidst the smoldering debris and the echoing cries of the wounded, the Morlocks face a grim reality. Their sanctuary has been overrun, their defenses breached, and their numbers significantly reduced. As the dust begins to settle, the reality of their dire situation becomes increasingly clear. News of the attack on the Morlocks quickly reaches the surface world, where the X-Men, a team of superheroes dedicated to protecting mutant kind, are based. The X-Men, led by Professor Charles Xavier, are no strangers to the conflicts that plague the world of mutants, but the brutality of the Reavers' assault is a shocking reminder of the dangers faced by those who live outside the mainstream. Professor Xavier, a telepathic mutant with the ability to read minds and communicate telepathically, is deeply troubled by the reports of the attack. His concern for the Morlocks, who have long been a marginalized group of mutants, prompts him to take immediate action. Xavier gathers the X-Men, a diverse team of superheroes with a range of powers and abilities, to address the crisis. Among them are Cyclops, the team leader with the ability to project powerful optic blasts; Storm, who controls the weather; Wolverine, a fierce fighter with regenerative abilities and retractable claws; and Nightcrawler, who can teleport short distances. The X-Men are not only motivated by their sense of duty, but also by a personal connection to the Morlocks. Some members of the team have had past interactions with the Morlocks and feel a strong sense of responsibility to aid them in their time of need. The urgency of the situation leaves no room for hesitation. The X-Men must act swiftly to provide aid and prevent further disaster. The team's first step is to assess the situation on the ground. Using their combined skills and resources, the X-Men make their way to the site of the attack. As they arrive, they are greeted by a scene of utter devastation. The tunnels that once served as the Morlocks' refuge are now a labyrinth of destruction. The air is thick with smoke, the walls are scorched and broken, and the remnants of the Morlocks' homes lie scattered across the debris-strewn floor. The X-Men quickly realize the scale of the tragedy they are witnessing. The Morlocks, though resilient, are in desperate need of assistance. Many of them are injured, some critically, and their capacity to organize and defend themselves has been severely compromised. The X-Men immediately begin to provide aid, using their powers to help with the rescue efforts and offer medical assistance to the wounded. Storm, with her ability to control the weather, creates a controlled climate to help ease the suffering of those who are injured and disoriented. She summons a gentle breeze to clear away the smoke and provides a cooling rain to help soothe the pain of the wounded. Her calming presence brings a sense of hope amidst the chaos. Cyclops takes charge of coordinating the rescue efforts, using his optic blasts to clear debris and create safe pathways for the Morlocks to navigate. His leadership and strategic mind are crucial in organizing the response and ensuring that every available resource is used efficiently. Wolverine, with his heightened senses and combat skills, searches for survivors and helps fend off any remaining threats from the Reavers or other potential dangers lurking in the aftermath of the attack. Nightcrawler, with his teleportation abilities, moves quickly through the rubble, rescuing those trapped in the wreckage and transporting them to safety. His ability to appear and disappear in an instant proves invaluable in navigating the dangerous and unstable environment. As the X-Men work tirelessly to provide immediate relief, they also begin to gather information about the attackers. They learn that the Reavers, a group of mercenaries with a well-documented history of hostility towards mutants, were hired to carry out the assault. The X-Men's knowledge of the Reavers' methods and capabilities helps them piece together the nature of the attack and the extent of the damage inflicted on the Morlocks. During this time, Professor Xavier uses his telepathic abilities to reach out to the Morlocks, offering comfort and reassurance. He communicates with Callisto, the Morlocks' leader, who is deeply shaken by the attack but grateful for the assistance. Xavier's telepathic communication allows him to assess the psychological impact of the attack on the Morlocks and provide guidance on how to cope with the trauma. The X-Men's response is not limited to immediate rescue efforts. Recognizing the need for long-term support and rebuilding, they begin to make plans to help the Morlocks recover from the devastation. They coordinate with various organizations and resources to provide aid, including medical supplies, temporary shelters, and counseling services to help the survivors process their experiences. The presence of the X-Men brings a sense of hope and solidarity to the Morlocks in their darkest hour. The team's dedication to their mission and their willingness to stand by the Morlocks during this crisis serve as a powerful testament to their commitment to the cause of mutant kind. The X-Men's actions not only provide tangible assistance but also offer a moral boost to a community that has been subjected to unspeakable violence. As the immediate crisis begins to subside, the X-Men remain committed to supporting the Morlocks in their recovery. They work closely with Callisto and other leaders within the Morlock community to address their needs and help them begin the process of rebuilding. The X-Men's involvement in the aftermath of the attack underscores their role as protectors and advocates for those who are marginalized and oppressed. The X-Men's response to the Reavers' assault on the Morlocks highlights the complex and often perilous nature of the world they inhabit. The attack serves as a stark reminder of the challenges faced by mutants and the ongoing struggle for acceptance and safety. The X-Men's efforts to aid the Morlocks and address the aftermath of the attack are part of a broader commitment to stand against injustice and provide support to those in need. The chapter concludes with a renewed sense of determination among the X-Men and the Morlocks. While the scars of the Reavers' attack will take time to heal, the presence of the X-Men and their unwavering support offer a glimmer of hope for a better future. The events set in motion by the attack will have far-reaching consequences, shaping the path forward for both the X-Men and the Morlocks as they navigate the complex and often perilous landscape of their world. As the devastation wrought by the Reavers continues to unravel, the remnants of the Morlocks' once thriving underground community lie in ruins. Amidst the wreckage, survivors grapple with the aftermath, and a sense of profound loss pervades the air. The survivors, struggling to come to terms with the scale of the destruction and the heavy toll taken on their community, begin to piece together what has happened, seeking answers and trying to understand the reasons behind the brutal assault. In the midst of this turmoil, a dark revelation comes to light, revealing the true nature of the Reavers' mission and the sinister forces at play. The truth, when it emerges, will shake the foundations of the Morlocks' understanding of their plight and set the stage for a deeper confrontation. The Morlocks, in their efforts to assess the damage and account for their missing members, uncover several crucial pieces of information. Among the wreckage, they find records and documents that provide insights into the Reavers' motivations and their connection to the broader conflict facing mutant kind. These documents include communications between Donald Pierce and his associates, revealing a chilling agenda behind the attack. The revelation begins to unfold through a series of grim discoveries. One of the surviving Morlocks, a mutant named Marrow who possesses the ability to control and generate bone growth, stumbles upon a hidden cache of data within the ruins of what was once the Morlocks' central command area. This data includes files and correspondences that were not completely destroyed in the attack. As Marrow carefully sifts through the fragmented information, she uncovers details that suggest the Reavers' attack was not just a random act of violence, but a coordinated operation with specific objectives. The documents indicate that Donald Pierce, the leader of the Reavers, was not acting alone. The attack on the Morlocks was part of a larger scheme orchestrated by an unnamed but influential figure within the anti-mutant faction. This figure, whose identity is shrouded in secrecy, had been seeking to eliminate the Morlocks as a strategic move to destabilize mutant resistance and consolidate control over mutant affairs. The Reavers were hired as mercenaries to carry out this ruthless plan, given their proficiency in dealing with mutant targets and their established reputation for brutality. As the truth begins to emerge, the Morlocks are faced with a harrowing realization. Their community was targeted not merely because they were mutants, but because their destruction was a calculated step in a broader scheme to subjugate and control all mutants. The attack was designed to send a message, a declaration of dominance by forces that view mutants as a threat to be eradicated rather than as individuals with their own rights and dignity. The impact of this revelation on the Morlocks is profound. The survivors, already reeling from the physical and emotional toll of the attack, must now confront the reality that their suffering was part of a larger, more insidious agenda. The knowledge that their plight was not an isolated incident, but a component of a grander strategy to undermine mutant kind adds a layer of bitterness and despair to their struggle. Callisto, the leader of the Morlocks, is deeply affected by the revelations. As she processes the information, she grapples with feelings of betrayal and anger. The attack on her people was not just an assault, but a deliberate maneuver in a larger, more dangerous game. This realization fuels her resolve to seek justice and to stand against the forces that seek to oppress and destroy mutants. In the wake of these revelations, the Morlocks begin to organize themselves with a renewed sense of purpose. They understand that their struggle is not just about rebuilding their homes, but about resisting a systemic threat to all mutants. Callisto and the other leaders within the Morlock community work to unite their people, focusing on recovery while also preparing for the possibility of further attacks. Their efforts are bolstered by the support of the X-Men, who remain committed to aiding the Morlocks and addressing the larger issue of mutant persecution. The X-Men, upon learning of the deeper motivations behind the Reavers' attack, intensify their efforts to uncover the identity of the shadowy figure behind the plot. They use their resources and connections to investigate the broader anti-mutant conspiracy, seeking to expose those responsible and prevent further attacks. The revelation of a larger scheme prompts the X-Men to adopt a more proactive stance, not just in response to individual incidents, but in combating the systemic forces that drive such acts of violence. The dark revelation serves as a catalyst for increased collaboration between the X-Men and the Morlocks. Both groups, now more aware of the shared threats they face, work together to strengthen their defenses and prepare for future challenges. The alliance between the X-Men and the Morlocks becomes more robust, driven by a common understanding of the dangers posed by their enemies and a mutual commitment to standing against oppression. The chapter concludes with a sense of grim resolve among the Morlocks and the X-Men. The dark revelation has exposed the harsh realities of their world, but it has also galvanized their determination to fight back against the forces that seek to oppress them. The stage is set for a continued and intensified struggle, as both the Morlocks and the X-Men prepare to confront the powerful adversaries who are determined to enforce their vision of mutant subjugation. The events that have unfolded mark a turning point in their battle, as they face not just the immediate aftermath of the Reavers' attack, but also the broader implications of the conspiracy that seeks to reshape their world. The assault on the Morlocks by the Reavers, led by Donald Pierce, has left the underground community in tatters, its members scattered and devastated. The survivors, grappling with the immense loss and destruction, are trying to piece together their lives amidst the rubble. Yet, even as they begin the long process of recovery, a darker, more insidious threat looms on the horizon. This threat comes in the form of the Marauders, a team of deadly mutants hired to further the goals of the same shadowy figures who orchestrated the attack on the Morlocks. The Marauders are a formidable and ruthless group, known for their relentless pursuit of mutant targets and their willingness to engage in heinous acts to achieve their objectives. They are led by Mr. Sinister, a malevolent figure with a deep-seated grudge against mutants and a chillingly cold demeanor. Mr. Sinister's motivations are complex and shrouded in secrecy, but his ultimate goal is to manipulate mutant kind for his own dark purposes. The Marauders, under Mr. Sinister's command, have been deployed to follow up on the Reavers' attack and to further destabilize the already weakened mutant community. Their mission is to exploit the chaos left in the wake of the Reavers' brutality and to undermine any attempts at recovery or resistance. The Marauders' arrival marks a new phase in the ongoing conflict, as their involvement introduces an additional layer of danger and malevolence. As the Marauders make their entrance, they are met with a scene of devastation and desperation among the Morlocks. The Marauders are aware of the Morlocks' vulnerability and view it as an opportunity to strike. Their approach is marked by a cold, calculated efficiency, reflecting their nature as merciless operatives committed to their sinister agenda. The Marauders' team includes several highly dangerous mutants, each with unique powers that make them formidable adversaries. Among them is Sabretooth, a feral mutant with enhanced strength, speed, and regenerative abilities. His savagery and predatory instincts make him a significant threat, capable of wreaking havoc with a mere swipe of his claws. There is also Malice, a mutant with the ability to possess and control others, using their bodies as instruments of her will. Her powers add a psychological dimension to the Marauder's threat, as she can undermine both physical and mental defenses. Another member of the Marauders is the formidable Scalp Hunter, known for his expertise in tracking and hunting down mutants. His skills make him particularly dangerous in the context of a post-attack environment where Morlocks are scattered and attempting to regroup. The Marauders also include Riptide, whose control over vortexes of spinning blades allows him to create devastating area of effect attacks. Each member of the Marauders is a master of their own particular form of aggression, contributing to the group's overall capability for destruction. The Marauders' mission is twofold: to capitalize on the Reavers' work by further decimating the Morlocks and to gather intelligence on any remaining pockets of resistance or hidden resources. Their arrival introduces a new wave of fear and uncertainty among the Morlocks, who are still reeling from the initial assault. As the Marauders make their presence known, they employ a strategy of terror and psychological warfare. They methodically hunt down the Morlocks who have managed to hide or escape the immediate aftermath of the Reavers' attack. Sabretooth, with his heightened senses and predatory nature, tracks down survivors with ruthless efficiency. Malice uses her powers to infiltrate and control any Morlocks who might be attempting to organize or resist. Her influence undermines the Morlocks' ability to coordinate and mount a unified defense. The Marauders' tactics are designed to not only cause physical harm, but also to break the spirit of the Morlocks. They launch surprise attacks, ambushing Morlocks in their temporary shelters and exploiting their weakened state. The Marauders' cruelty is evident in their actions, as they take pleasure in the suffering they inflict and the fear they instill. Their mission is to dismantle any semblance of hope or resistance among the Morlocks, leaving them demoralized and vulnerable. The X-Men, having been alerted to the continuing threats faced by the Morlocks, respond to the new danger posed by the Marauders. They understand that the Morlock survival is at stake and that the Marauders represent a severe escalation in the conflict. The X-Men, already engaged in efforts to assist the Morlocks in their recovery, now find themselves facing an even more formidable challenge. The confrontation between the X-Men and the Marauders is intense and fraught with danger. The X-Men are forced to confront each member of the Marauders, each of whom poses a unique and significant threat. Cyclops, with his optic blasts, takes on the challenge of fighting against Riptide's spinning blades, trying to neutralize the threat while protecting his teammates. Wolverine, with his regenerative abilities and claws, battles Sabretooth in a brutal clash, each combatant driven by a deep-seated animosity. Storm, using her control over the weather, attempts to counter the Marauders' attacks and provide support to the Morlocks. Her abilities to summon storms and create weather conditions play a crucial role in mitigating the damage inflicted by the Marauders and providing a tactical advantage to the X-Men. Nightcrawler's teleportation skills are put to the test as he navigates the chaotic battlefield, moving swiftly to rescue Morlocks and confront the Marauders. His agility and ability to appear and disappear make him a valuable asset in the effort to protect the Morlocks and counter the Marauders' advances. As the battle rages on, it becomes clear that the Marauders' mission is part of a larger scheme orchestrated by Mr. Sinister. The X-Men and the Morlocks uncover evidence suggesting that Mr. Sinister's ultimate goal is not just to inflict immediate damage, but to manipulate the mutant community for his own ends. The Marauders' actions are a means to an end, serving as a catalyst for furthering Mr. Sinister's broader agenda. The confrontation between the X-Men and the Marauders is not merely a clash of powers, but a struggle of ideologies. The X-Men fight not only to protect the Morlocks and prevent further destruction, but also to resist the manipulative machinations of Mr. Sinister and his agents. The battle underscores the complex and multifaceted nature of the conflict, where each side's motivations and actions are driven by deep-seated beliefs and objectives. The chapter unfolds as a gripping and high-stakes confrontation, with the X-Men and the Marauders locked in a fierce struggle. The outcome of this battle will have significant implications for both the immediate survival of the Morlocks and the broader conflict between mutants and those who seek to exploit or eradicate them. The Marauders' mission, marked by their ruthless efficiency and malevolent intent, represents a critical juncture in the ongoing struggle for mutant kind, setting the stage for future conflicts and shaping the path forward for both the X-Men and the Morlocks. The city's underbelly is a battleground of chaos and survival, where the Morlocks face their most desperate hour. The Marauders, having inflicted severe damage and sought to crush the Morlocks' resolve, continue their ruthless campaign. Their assault has not only caused physical devastation, but has driven a psychological wedge into the heart of the mutant community. The Morlocks, struggling to recover from the onslaught, find themselves caught in a desperate fight for survival as the Marauders press their advantage. In the midst of this turmoil, the Morlocks and the X-Men rally their forces for what is shaping up to be a climactic confrontation. The X-Men, understanding the gravity of the situation, deploy their full roster to aid the beleaguered Morlocks, each member bringing their unique abilities to the forefront. Their goal is clear: to push back the Marauders and provide the Morlocks with a fighting chance to reclaim their safety and dignity. As night falls, the battle intensifies. The Morlocks, still reeling from the initial attack, struggle to mount an organized defense. Their ranks are diminished, and their morale is battered, but their determination to survive is unshakable. Callisto, the leader of the Morlocks, emerges as a central figure in the fight. Her resolve to protect her people drives her to organize the survivors and coordinate their efforts in the face of overwhelming odds. Her leadership becomes a beacon of hope, rallying the Morlocks to stand firm against the Marauders' onslaught. The Marauders, led by Mr. Sinister, continue their assault with cold efficiency. Mr. Sinister, a figure of chilling intellect and malevolence, orchestrates the Marauders' movements with a calculating precision. His objective is not just to defeat the Morlocks, but to subjugate and demoralize them, making an example of their struggle to ensure that other mutant groups remain cowed and fearful. Sabretooth, with his predatory instincts, leads the charge against the Morlocks. His ferocity in battle is unmatched, and he relishes the opportunity to wreak havoc among the survivors. His enhanced strength and regenerative abilities make him a formidable opponent, and his presence on the battlefield adds a layer of terror to the already dire situation. Sabretooth's attacks are relentless, as he hunts down Morlocks with a savage efficiency that leaves little room for hope. Malice, another key member of the Marauders, uses her possession abilities to further undermine the Morlocks' defenses. By taking control of Morlock individuals, she sows confusion and discord among the defenders. Her actions create a sense of paranoia and mistrust within the Morlock ranks, making it difficult for them to mount a cohesive defense. The psychological impact of Malice's powers is as devastating as the physical damage inflicted by the Marauders. Scalp Hunter, with his expertise in tracking, plays a crucial role in hunting down any Morlocks who attempt to escape or hide. His skills are particularly effective in the chaos of the battle, as he uses his tracking abilities to locate and neutralize any hidden threats. Scalp Hunter's relentless pursuit adds to the sense of desperation among the Morlocks, as they are unable to find refuge or safety. Riptide, with his control over spinning blades, creates a deadly zone of attack. His ability to generate vortexes of sharp, spinning blades makes it extremely hazardous for anyone to approach him. The area around Riptide becomes a treacherous battleground where even the most determined Morlocks are at risk of being cut down by his devastating attacks. The X-Men, committed to assisting the Morlocks, engage the Marauders with a strategic approach. Cyclops, with his optic blasts, provides long-range support, targeting key Marauder members to reduce their effectiveness. His blasts are precision-guided, aimed at neutralizing threats without endangering the Morlocks. Cyclops coordinates with the other X-Men, ensuring that their efforts are synchronized and that they can effectively counter the Marauders' advances. Wolverine, driven by his personal vendetta against Sabretooth, engages in a brutal and ferocious battle. His adamantium claws clash with Sabretooth's claws in a savage duel, each combatant pushing their abilities to the limit. The fight between Wolverine and Sabretooth is a testament to their deep-seated enmity, with each blow and counterattack reflecting their mutual hatred. Storm, using her control over the weather, creates a protective barrier for the Morlocks. She summons powerful storms, using lightning and high winds to disrupt the Marauders' attack and provide a tactical advantage. Her weather manipulation helps to neutralize some of the Marauders' abilities, particularly Riptide's spinning blades, by creating conditions that make it more difficult for him to maintain his attack. Nightcrawler, with his teleportation abilities, plays a crucial role in rescuing Morlocks who are caught in the crossfire. His ability to appear and disappear allows him to quickly move between points of conflict, saving individuals from immediate danger and providing much-needed support where it is most needed. Nightcrawler's agility and teleportation skills make him an invaluable asset in the chaotic environment of the battle. As the battle rages on, the X-Men and the Morlocks face a series of intense confrontations with the Marauders. Each skirmish is marked by high stakes and brutal exchanges, with both sides pushing their abilities to the limit. The conflict is not only a test of physical endurance, but also a battle of wills, with the Morlocks fighting to defend their home and the Marauders seeking to impose their will through fear and violence. Throughout the battle, the X-Men and the Morlocks exhibit remarkable resilience and courage. Despite the overwhelming odds, they refuse to surrender or retreat. Their determination to protect their people and to stand against the Marauders' aggression is a testament to their strength and resolve. The fight is as much about survival as it is about resistance, with each side demonstrating their commitment to their respective causes. As the confrontation continues, the tide of the battle begins to shift. The X-Men, leveraging their teamwork and strategic coordination, manage to turn the tables on the Marauders. The Morlocks, inspired by the X-Men's example and driven by their own will to survive, begin to mount a more effective defense. The combined efforts of the X-Men and the Morlocks start to push back the Marauders, forcing them to retreat and regroup. The Marauders, faced with mounting resistance and significant casualties, realize that their mission is in jeopardy. The tide of the battle has turned, and the Morlocks, with the support of the X-Men, have managed to secure a measure of victory. The Marauders' retreat is a hard-fought achievement for the Morlocks and the X-Men, marking a crucial turning point in the battle for survival. In the aftermath of the conflict, the Morlocks and the X-Men begin the process of recovery. The battle has left its mark, with significant losses on both sides and a heavy toll on the survivors. The immediate threat from the Marauders has been quelled, but the struggle for the Morlocks is far from over. The fight has underscored the ongoing challenges they face, both from external threats and from the broader forces that seek to undermine mutant kind. The dust settles on the battlefield, leaving behind a scarred landscape marked by the brutal conflict between the Morlocks and the Marauders. The immediate aftermath reveals the extensive toll taken on both sides. The Morlock tunnels, once a hidden refuge beneath the city, are now a scene of devastation. Rubble and debris litter the area, evidence of the ferocious battles that have raged. The survivors of the Morlock community are left to confront the aftermath of the Marauders' vicious assault and the wreckage left by their conflict with the X-Men. In the midst of this grim reality, the Morlocks, though battered and exhausted, demonstrate remarkable resilience. Callisto, the Morlocks' leader, emerges as a symbol of hope and leadership. Her resolve is evident as she surveys the damage, her leadership tested to its limits. Despite the destruction, Callisto's focus remains on the survival and recovery of her people. She begins the arduous task of organizing the survivors, coordinating efforts to clear debris, tend to the wounded, and begin rebuilding their shattered home. The Morlocks' recovery is fraught with challenges. Many of their members have been injured or killed, and their once secure refuge has been compromised. The Morlocks must not only deal with the physical damage but also grapple with the emotional scars left by the Marauders' attack. The sense of fear and vulnerability that has pervaded their community is a significant hurdle to overcome. Yet, Callisto's leadership provides a beacon of strength and determination, helping to unite the survivors and instill a sense of purpose amidst the chaos. As the Morlocks begin their recovery, the X-Men are also dealing with the consequences of their involvement in the conflict. They reflect on the battle's impact, both on the Morlocks and on their own team. The X-Men's efforts to assist the Morlocks have solidified their commitment to mutant kind and highlighted the importance of their role as protectors. They have witnessed firsthand the suffering and resilience of the Morlocks and understand that their work is far from over. The aftermath of the battle brings the X-Men and the Morlocks closer together. The collaboration between the two groups has forged a new alliance, marked by mutual respect and understanding. The X-Men recognize the Morlocks as an integral part of the mutant community, deserving of support and solidarity. Similarly, the Morlocks, having seen the X-Men's commitment and bravery, begin to view them not just as allies but as friends and protectors. As part of the rebuilding process, the Morlocks and the X-Men engage in discussions about how to prevent future attacks and ensure the safety of all mutants. The X-Men offer their support in various ways, from providing resources to helping with security measures. This newfound alliance is a testament to the power of cooperation and the shared goal of protecting mutant kind. One significant development in the aftermath is the realization of the broader implications of the Marauders' attack. The Marauders were not acting in isolation but were part of a larger, more sinister agenda orchestrated by Mr. Sinister. The X-Men and the Morlocks recognize that the threat is not only about immediate survival but also about confronting the deeper, more insidious forces that seek to exploit and control mutants. In this context, the X-Men and the Morlocks work together to gather intelligence on Mr. Sinister and his plans. Their combined efforts aim to uncover the full extent of his schemes and to prepare for any future threats. This collaboration includes sharing information, strategizing, and forming a united front against those who would seek to harm them. The rebuilding process is slow and arduous, but there is a sense of renewed purpose among the Morlocks. Callisto, alongside the X-Men, begins to re-establish the Morlocks community, focusing on creating a safer and more resilient environment. The Morlocks work to repair their tunnels and shelters, addressing the physical damage while also providing support for those who have been emotionally impacted by the conflict. The X-Men's involvement in the recovery effort extends beyond immediate assistance. They offer training and support to the Morlocks, helping them to develop their own defensive capabilities and to prepare for any future threats. This training includes teaching the Morlocks how to better harness their powers and work together as a cohesive unit. The aim is to empower the Morlocks, ensuring that they are not only survivors but also capable of defending themselves and their community. As the Morlocks and the X-Men work side by side, new alliances and friendships begin to form. The bonds created during the battle and the subsequent recovery process strengthen the relationship between the two groups. The Morlocks, once isolated and marginalized, find themselves integrated into a broader network of support and cooperation. Amidst the rebuilding efforts, the Morlocks begin to regain a sense of stability and hope. The presence of the X-Men and the support they provide helps to lift the spirits of the Morlocks and instills a sense of optimism for the future. The collaboration between the two groups becomes a symbol of unity and strength, demonstrating that even in the face of adversity, cooperation and solidarity can lead to positive change. The aftermath of the conflict also brings about a period of reflection and introspection for both the Morlocks and the X-Men. The battle has revealed the harsh realities of their world and the ongoing challenges they face. It has also highlighted the importance of their continued efforts to protect and support each other. The new alliance between the X-Men and the Morlocks represents a hopeful step forward, with both groups committed to working together to confront future threats and build a better future for all mutants. X-Men, Age of Apocalypse, 1995 to 1996. In a world teetering on the edge of an unknown future, the seeds of chaos were sown by one man's desperate desire to reshape history. David Haller, a young mutant of extraordinary power and equally extraordinary torment, was haunted by the fragmented voices in his mind. Each voice was a distinct personality, a reflection of the complex tapestry of his shattered psyche. As the son of Charles Xavier, the founder of the X-Men and the foremost advocate for peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants, David grew up under the shadow of a man whose dream seemed both noble and unattainable. Yet, despite his father's aspirations, the world remained divided, and the conflicts between mutants and humans showed no signs of abating. David, who had long struggled with his mental illness and the overwhelming burden of his abilities, began to fixate on a singular notion. If the world's troubles could be traced back to a single source, then perhaps it could be fixed by removing that source. His thoughts turned to Magneto, the charismatic and powerful mutant whose radical views on mutant superiority often put him at odds with Xavier's peaceful ideology. To David, Magneto represented the greatest threat to his father's dream, a dream that David had come to believe was his birthright to protect and fulfill. The plan David conceived was both grand and perilous. He would use his powers to travel back in time, to a moment when his father and Magneto were still allies, before the schism that would eventually lead to their opposing paths. In his mind, by eliminating Magneto at this critical juncture, he could ensure that his father's vision of peace would come to fruition unchallenged, and the world would be a better place for it. But David's plan, born of both desperation and love, was fatally flawed. His understanding of time and the consequences of altering it was limited by the very madness that drove him. In a moment of intense focus, David reached deep within himself and harnessed his mutant ability to manipulate time. The world around him dissolved into a blur of energy and light as he willed himself into the past, his mind set on his singular purpose. As he traveled through the temporal stream, the voices in his head grew louder, each personality vying for control, but David's determination held firm. He would succeed where so many had failed. He would make things right. David arrived in the past, emerging in a world that was both familiar and alien to him. It was a time before the X-Men, before the war between mutants and humans had escalated to its current state. Charles Xavier and Eric Lenscher, the man who would become Magneto, were not yet the figures of legend they would later be. Instead, they were friends, two men bound by a shared hope for the future of their kind. They worked side by side, tirelessly, to lay the foundations of what they believed could be a world where mutants and humans could coexist in harmony. But this friendship, this fragile alliance, was not to last. Even in this time, the ideological differences between Xavier and Lenscher were evident. Where Xavier saw the potential for peace, Lenscher saw only the inevitability of conflict. It was in the midst of this delicate period that David made his move. Driven by the belief that his actions would save countless lives, he sought out Magneto with the intent to end his life before he could become the adversary that David knew him to be. David confronted Magneto in a secluded location, away from the prying eyes of the world. Magneto, unaware of the true nature of his attacker, was taken aback by the sudden appearance of this young, powerful mutant. David's eyes burned with a fevered intensity as he unleashed his psychic energy, his powers fueled by the singularity of his purpose. Magneto, despite his formidable abilities, found himself overmatched by the sheer force of David's assault. As the battle raged, the air crackled with energy, and the very fabric of reality seemed to tremble under the strain of the conflict. But as David moved in for the final blow, something unexpected happened. Charles Xavier, who had sensed the disturbance and arrived just in time, intervened. In an act of pure selflessness, Xavier threw himself between David and Magneto, taking the full force of his son's attack. Time seemed to slow as Xavier's body was engulfed in a burst of energy, his life force extinguished in an instant. The world held its breath, and then, with a shudder, reality itself began to unravel. With Xavier's death, the timeline was irrevocably altered. The dream of peaceful coexistence died with him, and in its place, a new reality began to take shape, a reality in which the strongest and most ruthless would rise to power. As the ripples of this catastrophic event spread across time, they gave birth to a new world, a world dominated by Apocalypse. Apocalypse, an ancient mutant of unparalleled power, had long been a figure of legend and fear. His philosophy was simple: only the strong should survive, and the weak were destined to serve or perish. In the original timeline, Apocalypse had been a constant threat, but the presence of the X-Men, led by Xavier, had always managed to keep him in check. But now, with Xavier gone, there was nothing to stop Apocalypse from achieving his ultimate goal: total domination. Apocalypse began his campaign with ruthless efficiency. He saw the fractured world as an opportunity to reshape it in his image. Without the guiding hand of Xavier to unite the mutants, Apocalypse's philosophy of survival of the fittest quickly took root. He gathered around him a group of powerful mutants, who he dubbed his Horsemen, each chosen for their strength and loyalty to his cause. These Horsemen would become the enforcers of Apocalypse's will, spreading fear and destruction wherever they went. As Apocalypse's power grew, so too did his ambitions. He set his sights on North America, a continent ripe for conquest. With his Horsemen leading the charge, Apocalypse's forces swept across the land, crushing all who dared to oppose them. Cities were reduced to ruins, their populations either slaughtered or enslaved. Those who survived lived in constant fear of the next attack, knowing that their lives were at the mercy of a tyrant who believed only in the law of strength. In the wake of this devastation, Magneto found himself haunted by the memory of Xavier's death. The guilt of knowing that his friend had died to save him weighed heavily on his conscience. He knew that Xavier had been the heart and soul of the dream for a better world, and without him, that dream seemed all but lost. But Magneto also knew that he could not let Xavier's sacrifice be in vain. He had to do something, even if it meant going against everything he had once believed. Determined to honor Xavier's memory, Magneto took up the mantle of leadership. He gathered a group of mutants, many of whom had once been students of Xavier, and formed a resistance movement. This group, which he called the X-Men, was dedicated not to peaceful coexistence, but to the overthrow of Apocalypse. Magneto knew that the only way to stop Apocalypse was through force, and so he trained his X-Men not as diplomats, but as warriors. Magneto's X-Men operated in the shadows, striking at Apocalypse's forces whenever and wherever they could. Their missions were dangerous, often requiring them to infiltrate heavily guarded strongholds or engage in pitched battles against overwhelming odds. They faced constant threats, not just from Apocalypse's Horsemen, but also from the harsh world in which they lived. Resources were scarce, and the cost of failure was always death. Among Magneto's X-Men were some of the most powerful and skilled mutants of their time. They included heroes who, in the original timeline, might have been leaders or icons, but in this reality, they were hardened soldiers, driven by the need to survive and to fight for a world that had forgotten what peace even looked like. Each member of the X-Men had their own reasons for joining the fight, whether it was to avenge the loss of a loved one, to protect what little remained of their home, or simply to resist the tyranny that threatened to engulf them all. As the war against Apocalypse raged on, the X-Men found themselves pushed to their limits. They fought battle after battle, losing friends and comrades along the way. The toll of the conflict was immense, both physically and emotionally. Magneto, who had always been a man of strong will, felt the weight of every decision, every life lost, and every victory that came at too great a cost. Yet, he knew that they could not afford to give up. To do so would be to condemn the world to an eternity under Apocalypse's rule. Despite the overwhelming odds, there were moments of hope. Small victories, though fleeting, gave the X-Men the strength to continue their fight. They forged alliances with other resistance groups, each of whom had their own grievances against Apocalypse. These alliances were tenuous, often strained by the harsh realities of their world, but they were necessary. Magneto knew that the only way to defeat Apocalypse was through unity, even if that unity was born of desperation rather than trust. As the X-Men fought to liberate North America from Apocalypse's grip, they began to uncover the truth about the timeline. Some among them, particularly those with knowledge of temporal mechanics or psychic abilities, began to suspect that the world they were living in was not the world that was meant to be. They theorized that something had altered the past, creating the nightmare they now faced. But the how and why of it remained elusive, buried beneath layers of war and destruction. These suspicions grew into a belief that if they could somehow restore the timeline, they could undo the horrors that had befallen their world. But how could they achieve such a feat? The very idea of traveling through time, of correcting a mistake that had shattered reality itself, seemed impossible. Yet, as the war dragged on and their losses mounted, the X-Men knew that they had to try. The alternative was a world ruled by Apocalypse forever, a world where hope was nothing more than a fading memory. And so, the X-Men continued their fight, driven by the hope that somewhere, somehow, they could find a way to set things right. They battled Apocalypse's forces, they liberated those who had been enslaved, and they searched for any clue that might lead them to the truth. Along the way, they faced unimaginable challenges, from battles with the Horsemen to encounters with other mutants who had been twisted by the cruel reality of their world. Magneto, ever the leader, guided his X-Men through these trials with a heavy heart. He knew that the odds were against them, that the world they lived in was one of unending conflict and suffering. But he also knew that as long as they continued to fight, there was still a chance, however slim, that they could change the course of history. He carried with him the memory of Xavier, the friend he had lost, and the dream they had once shared. That dream, though battered and bruised, still burned within him, a beacon of hope in the darkness. In the end, the battle between the X-Men and Apocalypse was more than just a struggle for survival. It was a fight for the very soul of the world. A fight to reclaim a future that had been stolen by the actions of one man. A man who, in his misguided attempt to save the world, had instead condemned it to a nightmare. The X-Men knew that their task was monumental, that they were up against forces far greater than themselves. But they also knew that they were the last line of defense against Apocalypse, and that if they failed, the world would be lost forever. And so, they fought on, against all odds, in a world where the strong ruled and the weak perished. They fought for the memory of a man who had believed in a better world, and for the hope that one day, that world could still come to pass. And though the path was long and fraught with danger, they knew that they could not afford to falter. For in this world, where darkness reigned supreme, they were the last, best hope for a future free of tyranny and fear. The stage was set, the players in place, and the final battle for the fate of the world was about to begin. All that remained was to see who would emerge victorious in this war of survival, and whether the X-Men could find a way to undo the damage that had been done. The answer to that question would determine the fate of not just their world, but the very fabric of reality itself. In the aftermath of Charles Xavier's death, the world was irrevocably altered. As time reformed itself around this tragic event, the balance of power shifted, and in this new reality, the ancient mutant known as Apocalypse began his ascent. Apocalypse, born En-Saba-Nur in ancient Egypt, had always harbored a philosophy centered on survival of the fittest, a belief that only the strongest should rule. Without Xavier's influence to counterbalance this ideology, Apocalypse found the perfect environment to rise to power and impose his will upon the world. The world in which Apocalypse emerged was one of chaos and division. Without the guidance of Xavier, mutants were not united by a common goal of peace, but were instead fragmented, their powers unchecked and their ambitions unleashed. Apocalypse, a master of manipulation and strategy, saw in this fractured world an opportunity to bring his vision to life. He began by gathering the most powerful mutants he could find, those whose abilities and resolve matched his own ideals. These mutants would become his horsemen, the harbingers of his rule. The process of selecting his horsemen was as brutal as it was effective. Apocalypse sought out mutants who had not only immense power but also the will to use it without hesitation. He scoured the globe, leaving no stone unturned in his quest to find those who would serve him without question. Those who resisted were either killed or broken, their fates serving as a grim reminder to others of what awaited those who defied him. Among the first to join his cause was Warren Worthington III, a mutant with the ability to fly using his large, feathered wings. In the original timeline, Warren had been a member of the X-Men, known as Angel. But in this new world, Apocalypse found him broken and disillusioned, a man who had lost his sense of purpose. Apocalypse offered him a chance at rebirth, transforming him into Archangel, the Horseman of Death. His wings were remade into razor-sharp metallic blades, his mind altered to serve Apocalypse without question. Archangel became a symbol of Apocalypse's power, a reminder that even the noblest of heroes could be corrupted. As Apocalypse's influence grew, so too did the fear he inspired. His name became synonymous with terror, his mere presence enough to bring nations to their knees. Apocalypse believed that the weak had no place in his world, and under his rule, the strong thrived while the weak were culled. His rise to power was marked by a series of brutal conquests, each more devastating than the last. Cities fell, their populations either slaughtered or enslaved. Those who survived were forced into hiding, living in constant fear of the next attack. Apocalypse established his stronghold in North America, a continent that had become a wasteland under his rule. From this fortress, he commanded his horsemen and his legions of followers, sending them out to enforce his will across the globe. His power seemed unassailable, his dominion over the world growing with each passing day. Under his rule, the world became a nightmarish landscape where only the strongest survived. Humanity, once the dominant species on the planet, was now hunted and oppressed, their numbers dwindling as they were subjected to Apocalypse's ruthless regime. Magneto, who had once been Xavier's friend and ally, was now the leader of the X-Men, a resistance group dedicated to stopping Apocalypse. Magneto had always been a man of conviction, but the death of Xavier had changed him. He was driven not just by a desire to defeat Apocalypse, but by a deep sense of guilt and responsibility. He knew that the world they now lived in was, in part, his doing, and he was determined to make things right, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The X-Men under Magneto's leadership were a far cry from the idealistic group that Xavier had once envisioned. They were soldiers, fighting a guerrilla war against an enemy that was vastly more powerful. They operated from hidden bases, constantly on the move to avoid detection by Apocalypse's forces. Supplies were scarce, and every mission carried with it the risk of death or capture. Yet, despite the odds, they continued to fight, driven by the hope that they could one day bring an end to Apocalypse's reign. Magneto's X-Men were composed of mutants from all walks of life. Some were former students of Xavier, others were mutants who had been on the run, hunted by Apocalypse's forces. Each had their own reasons for joining the fight, but they were united by a common goal: to stop Apocalypse and restore some semblance of order to the world. Among them was Rogue, a mutant with the ability to absorb the powers and memories of others through touch. In this world, Rogue was one of Magneto's most trusted allies, her powers making her a formidable opponent in battle. As the X-Men waged their war, they encountered other resistance groups, each with its own methods and motivations. Some were willing to work with Magneto, seeing him as the only one capable of leading a successful rebellion against Apocalypse. Others were more hesitant, wary of Magneto's past and his reputation as a ruthless leader. The X-Men's alliances were often tenuous, held together by the shared need to survive in a world where Apocalypse's forces were a constant threat. One of the most significant battles during this time took place in the ruins of New York City. Once a symbol of human achievement, the city had been reduced to rubble under Apocalypse's rule. The X-Men launched a daring raid on one of Apocalypse's strongholds, hoping to disrupt his operations and gather intelligence that could be used against him. The battle was fierce, with the X-Men facing off against both Apocalypse's horsemen and his army of loyal followers. During the battle, the X-Men discovered a hidden laboratory where Apocalypse had been conducting experiments on both humans and mutants. These experiments were designed to enhance the abilities of his followers, creating super soldiers that would serve him in his quest for global domination. The sight of these twisted creations filled the X-Men with both rage and sorrow, knowing that many of the subjects had once been innocent civilians, now reduced to little more than weapons in Apocalypse's war machine. Despite the heavy losses, the X-Men managed to destroy the laboratory and cripple a significant portion of Apocalypse's forces in the area. However, the victory came at a great cost. Several members of the X-Men were killed in the battle, their sacrifices a stark reminder of the high price of freedom in this new world. Magneto, though hardened by years of conflict, felt each loss keenly, knowing that every fallen comrade was one less soldier in the fight against Apocalypse. As the war dragged on, the X-Men found themselves pushed to their limits, both physically and mentally. The constant threat of death, the scarcity of resources, and the overwhelming power of their enemy took a toll on even the strongest among them. But they knew that giving up was not an option. The world under Apocalypse's rule was one of suffering and despair, and the X-Men were the only hope for those who still believed in a better future. Apocalypse, for his part, remained confident in his power. He saw the X-Men as little more than an annoyance, a minor obstacle in his path to total domination. He continued to expand his influence, bringing more and more of the world under his control. His horsemen, each a terrifying force in their own right, carried out his orders with ruthless efficiency, crushing any resistance that dared to rise against him. As Apocalypse's power grew, so too did his ambitions. He began to look beyond Earth, seeking to extend his influence to other worlds, other dimensions. He believed that his destiny was to rule not just the Earth, but the entire universe. To this end, he began to search for ways to increase his power even further, to become a god among mutants and humans alike. In this dark and uncertain time, the X-Men continued their fight, knowing that they were up against a force that seemed unstoppable. But they also knew that they had no choice. The world they lived in was a nightmare, and they were the only ones who could wake it from its slumber. Each battle, each mission, brought them closer to their goal, but also further into the depths of despair. Yet, despite the odds, they pressed on, driven by the hope that one day, they could bring an end to Apocalypse's reign and restore some measure of peace to a world that had forgotten what peace even was. And so, the war between Apocalypse and the X-Men raged on, a war that would determine the fate of not just their world, but the very future of humanity and mutant kind. The rise of Apocalypse had set the stage for a conflict of unimaginable proportions, a conflict that would test the limits of the X-Men's strength, resolve, and faith. In this world of darkness and despair, the X-Men were the last, best hope for a future free of tyranny and oppression, and they would stop at nothing to see that future realized. In a world reshaped by the death of Charles Xavier, Apocalypse's dominion had spread across the globe like a dark cloud, suffocating the remnants of hope and freedom. With his vision of a world where only the strong survived, Apocalypse had transformed the Earth into a desolate and unforgiving landscape. His rule was absolute, his presence omnipresent, and under his iron grip, the world was plunged into an age of despair. The continents were no longer the vibrant, diverse lands they once were. North America, once a beacon of democracy and freedom, had become the heart of Apocalypse's empire. His fortress, an immense structure of cold, unyielding metal, loomed over the ruins of what had once been New York City. The city, now a crumbling wasteland, bore the scars of countless battles and the heavy toll of Apocalypse's rule. Skyscrapers that had once touched the sky were now reduced to skeletal remains, twisted and broken, a testament to the destruction that had swept the land. Across North America, the population was divided into two distinct classes: the strong, who served Apocalypse, and the weak, who were either enslaved or exterminated. Those who had powers were forced into service, conscripted into Apocalypse's army, or used as fodder in his endless wars. Humans without powers were hunted, their lives deemed worthless in a world where strength was the only currency. The few who managed to evade capture lived in constant fear, hiding in the shadows, struggling to survive in a world that no longer had a place for them. The streets of the once great cities were patrolled by Apocalypse's forces, an army of mutants and genetically enhanced soldiers who enforced his brutal laws. These soldiers, loyal to Apocalypse, were merciless in their duties. They scoured the land for any signs of resistance, hunting down those who dared to defy their master. Public executions were common, serving as a grim reminder to the populace of the fate that awaited those who stood against Apocalypse. The countryside fared no better. Farmlands that once provided food for millions were now barren, scorched by the fires of war. The few who still worked the land did so under the watchful eyes of Apocalypse's enforcers, their labor going not to feed themselves or their families, but to sustain Apocalypse's war machine. Hunger and disease were rampant, and for many, the will to live had all but faded. Entire communities were wiped out, either through direct assault or through the slow, insidious decay that came from living under such tyranny. In South America, the once lush rainforests were decimated, their ecosystems destroyed to fuel Apocalypse's expansion. The indigenous populations were either enslaved or massacred, their lands taken and their cultures erased. This continent, rich in resources, was stripped bare, its wealth used to further Apocalypse's ambitions. The devastation was so complete that even the weather seemed to turn against the land, with violent storms and unnatural droughts becoming the norm. Europe, too, was not spared. The cities that had stood for centuries, bastions of history and culture, were now ruins, their treasures looted or destroyed. London, Paris, Berlin, all had fallen under Apocalypse's rule. The people who once called these cities home were scattered, their lives shattered. Some fled to the mountains or forests, hoping to escape the reach of Apocalypse's forces. Others formed resistance cells, determined to fight back, though their efforts were often in vain. The remnants of old governments tried to maintain order, but without the resources or the manpower, their influence was negligible. In Asia, Apocalypse's rule was met with fierce resistance. The vast populations of China and India, the disciplined armies of Japan, and the hardened warriors of the Middle East all rose up to challenge his dominion. But despite their numbers and their resolve, they could not withstand the onslaught of Apocalypse's forces. Entire regions were laid waste, and the survivors were forced to bow to Apocalypse or face annihilation. The Himalayas, once a refuge, were now a battleground, with the last remnants of resistance making their stand among the snow-capped peaks. Africa, a continent rich in diversity and resources, became a key battleground in Apocalypse's war for supremacy. Here, the conflict was brutal and unrelenting. The nations of Africa, many of which had long been fractured by internal strife, were now united in their opposition to Apocalypse. But even their combined strength was not enough. The jungles of the Congo, the deserts of the Sahara, and the savannas of the Serengeti all became theaters of war. The Wakandans, a proud and technologically advanced people, fought valiantly to protect their homeland, but even their advanced technology was tested against the might of Apocalypse. In Australia, the harsh environment provided a natural barrier against Apocalypse's forces, but even this was not enough to protect the continent. The people of Australia, isolated from the rest of the world, formed their own resistance using the rugged terrain to their advantage. However, as the conflict dragged on, even these hardy survivors found themselves struggling to fend off Apocalypse's relentless onslaught. Apocalypse's empire was not just built on brute force. It was also sustained by a complex web of alliances and subjugations. Mutants who were powerful enough to be useful but not strong enough to challenge him were offered positions of power in exchange for their loyalty. These collaborators were granted dominion over regions or resources, becoming lords and governors under Apocalypse's rule. They enforced his laws with an iron fist, often more out of fear of losing their positions than out of any true loyalty to Apocalypse. The world under Apocalypse was a world without mercy, without compassion. It was a world where the concepts of justice and freedom had been twisted beyond recognition. The strong thrived while the weak were crushed underfoot. Those who dared to dream of a better world did so in secret, knowing that to speak of such dreams openly was to invite death. Yet, despite the overwhelming darkness, there were still pockets of resistance. Across the globe, small groups of rebels, many of them mutants who had once been part of Xavier's dream, continued to fight against Apocalypse. These resistance fighters were vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with a determination born of desperation. They knew that if they failed, the world would be lost to Apocalypse forever. Among these resistance fighters were the X-Men, led by Magneto. Unlike the idealistic team that had once followed Xavier, this new generation of X-Men was hardened by years of conflict. They were guerrilla fighters, striking from the shadows, using hit-and-run tactics to weaken Apocalypse's forces. They had no central base, constantly moving to avoid detection. They were always on the run, always outnumbered, but never defeated. Each small victory gave them hope, and each loss only strengthened their resolve. Magneto's leadership was marked by a sense of grim determination. He had lost much in this war, friends, allies, and his sense of hope for the future. But he had not lost his will to fight. He believed that as long as there was even a single spark of resistance, there was still a chance to overthrow Apocalypse. He inspired his followers with his resolve, urging them to hold on to the belief that they could reclaim the world, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The X-Men's resistance was not without its challenges. They were constantly hunted by Apocalypse's forces, who saw them as the greatest threat to his rule. The horsemen, Apocalypse's most loyal and powerful servants, were tasked with rooting out and destroying the resistance. Each of the horsemen was a force to be reckoned with, wielding incredible power and showing no mercy to their enemies. To face a horseman in battle was to face almost certain death, and yet the X-Men continued to do so, knowing that every battle won was a step closer to toppling Apocalypse. In addition to the horsemen, Apocalypse commanded legions of soldiers, both human and mutant, who were fiercely loyal to him. These soldiers were well-trained and well-equipped, making them a formidable force on the battlefield. They carried out Apocalypse's orders without question, enforcing his rule with brutal efficiency. The X-Men knew that they could not defeat these forces in a direct confrontation, so they relied on sabotage, intelligence gathering, and hit-and-run tactics to weaken their enemies. But it was not just the X-Men who resisted. Across the world, other groups rose up to challenge Apocalypse's rule. Some were former governments trying to reclaim their nations, others were independent militias formed by those who refused to live under tyranny. These groups were often isolated and fragmented, with little communication between them, but they shared a common goal: the downfall of Apocalypse. In the shadows, there were also those who worked against Apocalypse in more subtle ways. Spies, double agents, and saboteurs infiltrated his ranks, feeding information to the resistance and undermining his efforts from within. These individuals were often former followers of Apocalypse who had turned against him, or those who had been forced into his service but secretly opposed his rule. Their work was dangerous, and many were discovered and executed, but their contributions were invaluable to the resistance. Apocalypse, aware of the resistance, sought to crush it with overwhelming force. He unleashed his armies, his horsemen, and his most terrifying creations to hunt down and destroy those who opposed him. His strategy was one of total war, leaving no room for mercy or compromise. He believed that by completely eradicating the resistance, he could finally secure his rule and bring about the world he envisioned, a world where only the strongest would survive. Despite the odds, the resistance continued to fight. The X-Men and their allies knew that they were up against a seemingly unstoppable force, but they also knew that they could not give up. They fought not just for themselves, but for the future of the world. They believed that if they could defeat Apocalypse, they could rebuild a world where mutants and humans could coexist in peace, a world where the ideals of Xavier could finally be realized. The world under Apocalypse was a nightmare, a dystopian reality where the strong ruled and the weak perished. It was a world where hope was a rare and precious commodity, where survival was a daily struggle. But even in this dark world, there were those who refused to give up, who continued to fight for a better future. The rise of Apocalypse had brought about an age of darkness, but the resistance knew that as long as they fought, there was still a chance to bring about a new dawn. In the shadow of Apocalypse's tyrannical rule, a beacon of defiance flickered in the form of the resistance movement, a coalition of mutants, humans, and any who dared to oppose the oppressive regime. This movement was born out of necessity, an amalgamation of those who had lost everything and those who still clung to a desperate hope for a better world. Their lives were filled with peril and uncertainty, but they were united by a single purpose: to bring an end to Apocalypse's reign. The resistance was not a single, unified force, but rather a network of cells scattered across the globe. Each cell operated independently, often with little knowledge of the other's existence. This decentralized structure made the movement difficult to crush, even as Apocalypse's forces tried to root out every last remnant of opposition. The cells varied in size and capability, from small groups of guerrilla fighters to larger, more organized factions with the resources to mount significant offensives. Despite their differences, these groups shared intelligence, resources, and sometimes even personnel, forming a loosely connected web of resistance that spanned continents. At the heart of the resistance were the X-Men, now led by Magneto. Unlike his previous incarnation as a villain, Magneto had become a symbol of hope and resilience. He was driven by the memory of Charles Xavier, his old friend and ideological rival, whose death had set this dark timeline into motion. Magneto's leadership was marked by pragmatism and a relentless drive to achieve victory, even if it meant making difficult and often morally ambiguous decisions. His belief in mutant superiority remained, but it was tempered by the necessity of forming alliances with humans and other groups that shared the same goal of overthrowing Apocalypse. Magneto's X-Men operated out of a hidden base, constantly on the move to avoid detection by Apocalypse's forces. The base, a makeshift compound deep within a remote forest, was a stark contrast to the once state-of-the-art facilities the X-Men had known. Supplies were scarce, and every resource had to be carefully rationed. Despite the harsh conditions, the base was a hub of activity. Mutants trained rigorously, honing their abilities for the inevitable confrontations with Apocalypse's forces. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to develop new technologies that could give the Resistance an edge in battle. The atmosphere was one of grim determination, with every member of the X-Men fully aware that failure meant not just the end of their lives, but the end of any hope for the future. Among the key members of the X-Men was Rogue, whose power to absorb the abilities and memories of others had become both a blessing and a curse. She was a fierce warrior, but the accumulation of memories from those she had absorbed weighed heavily on her. The constant influx of personalities and experiences often made it difficult for her to maintain her own identity, yet she remained one of the most loyal and effective members of the team. Her relationship with Magneto was complex, built on mutual respect and a shared history of loss and sacrifice. Together, they led the X-Men in countless battles, always striving to stay one step ahead of their enemies. Another crucial figure in the Resistance was Gambit, the Cajun thief whose charm and agility made him an invaluable asset. Gambit's skills in infiltration and reconnaissance were unmatched, and he often undertook the most dangerous missions behind enemy lines. His roguish demeanor belied a deep sense of loyalty to the cause, and he fought not just for the world he had lost, but for the one he hoped to build with Rogue by his side. Gambit's knowledge of the criminal underworld provided the Resistance with vital intelligence, as he had contacts and informants in places that few others could reach. In addition to these veterans, the X-Men had recruited new blood into their ranks. Generation Next, a team of young mutants trained by Colossus and Shadowcat, represented the next generation of X-Men. Despite their youth and inexperience, they were fierce fighters, driven by the knowledge that they were the last hope for a dying world. Their missions were often the most perilous, as they were tasked with infiltrating enemy strongholds and gathering crucial intelligence. These young mutants, including Husk, Mondo, and Vincente, were hardened by the harsh realities of war, their innocence long since lost to the relentless conflict. Beyond the X-Men, other factions within the Resistance played vital roles in the struggle against Apocalypse. The Human High Council, a coalition of surviving human leaders, was based in Europe and led by Moira MacTaggert and Brian Braddock. They represented one of the few organized human resistance groups, and though they were often at odds with the X-Men over tactics and strategy, their contributions were crucial. The Human High Council focused on mass mobilization, using their limited resources to arm and train human soldiers in the fight against Apocalypse. They also sought to form alliances with other human factions across the globe, though such efforts were often hampered by the overwhelming reach of Apocalypse's empire. In the Pacific Northwest, a group known as the Outcasts waged their own war against Apocalypse. Led by a mysterious figure known only as the Owl, the Outcasts were a ragtag band of mutants and humans who had escaped from the Pens, Apocalypse's brutal internment camps. The Outcasts operated from the dense forests and rugged terrain of the region, using guerrilla tactics to strike at Apocalypse's forces. Their knowledge of the terrain and their ability to blend into the wilderness made them a thorn in the side of the local authorities, who struggled to track them down. While the outcasts and the X-Men focused on direct action, the Morlocks, an underground society of mutants, played a more covert role. The Morlocks, who had long lived beneath the cities in the sewers and abandoned tunnels, had expanded their network to create a vast underground railroad. This network was used to smuggle mutants and humans out of Apocalypse's territories, helping them reach the relative safety of the human High Council's territories in Europe. The Morlocks' leader, Marrow, was ruthless in her protection of her people, and the Morlocks became one of the most effective underground movements in the world. The Resistance was not just a military force. It was also a symbol of hope for those living under Apocalypse's rule. Stories of the Resistance's exploits spread like wildfire, whispered in the darkest corners of the world. These stories gave hope to the hopeless, inspiring others to rise up and join the fight. The Resistance was a beacon in a world of darkness, and even those who could not fight took solace in knowing that there were still those who dared to defy Apocalypse. Despite their efforts, the Resistance faced overwhelming odds. Apocalypse's forces were vast and well-equipped, and his rule was enforced by the Four Horsemen, each of whom was a living weapon of mass destruction. The Horsemen war, death, pestilence, and famine were Apocalypse's enforcers, sent to crush any sign of rebellion with extreme prejudice. Their power was immense, and even the X-Men found themselves hard-pressed to stand against them. The Horsemen operated with impunity, sweeping across the land like a force of nature, leaving destruction in their wake. Yet the Resistance refused to be cowed. They knew that each victory, no matter how small, chipped away at Apocalypse's hold on the world. They launched daring raids on supply depots, sabotaged key infrastructure, and targeted high-ranking officials within Apocalypse's regime. These actions, while often costly, served to weaken Apocalypse's grip and inspire others to take up arms. The Resistance became masters of asymmetric warfare, using their knowledge of the terrain and their ability to move unseen to strike at their enemies where they least expected it. One of the Resistance's most daring operations was the rescue of captured mutants from one of Apocalypse's most heavily guarded prisons. This facility, located in the heart of his territory, was where dissenters, rebels, and those deemed a threat to his rule were held and subjected to horrific experiments. The X-Men, led by Nightcrawler, launched a stealthy infiltration, using Nightcrawler's teleportation abilities to bypass the outer defenses. The mission was fraught with danger, as the team had to navigate through heavily fortified corridors, facing both automated defenses and guards loyal to Apocalypse. The rescue was a success, though not without cost. Several members of the team were wounded, and the toll on their morale was heavy. However, the prisoners they freed were invaluable to the Resistance. Among them were mutants with unique abilities that would later prove crucial in the fight against Apocalypse. The success of this mission emboldened the Resistance, demonstrating that even the most fortified of Apocalypse's installations could be breached. As the war dragged on, the Resistance grew bolder. They began to strike at more strategic targets, disrupting supply lines and communications, and even staging assassinations of key figures within Apocalypse's government. These actions forced Apocalypse to divert resources to deal with the growing insurgency, stretching his forces thinner and opening up new opportunities for the Resistance. The X-Men and their allies capitalized on these weaknesses, launching coordinated strikes that began to turn the tide of the conflict. But the Resistance's fight was far from over. Apocalypse, aware of the growing threat, began to take more drastic measures to crush the rebellion. He intensified his efforts to hunt down the X-Men, dispatching his most powerful forces to track and eliminate them. The war entered a new, more brutal phase, with the casualties mounting on both sides. The Resistance faced not only the might of Apocalypse's armies, but also the threat of betrayal from within as spies and informants sought to undermine their efforts. Throughout all this, the members of the resistance were driven by a single, unyielding belief that Apocalypse could be defeated. They fought not just for their own survival, but for the chance to create a new world from the ashes of the old one. They were willing to sacrifice everything, even their lives, to see that dream realized. And though the road ahead was fraught with danger, they knew that as long as they fought together, there was still hope. In the shadow of Apocalypse's world, where the air was thick with the stench of despair, there lurked a figure whose presence was as ominous as it was insidious: the Dark Beast. This figure, an alternate version of the genius scientist Henry Hank McCoy, was a twisted reflection of the heroic mutant known as Beast. The Dark Beast's role in Apocalypse's regime was as a mad scientist and a manipulator, conducting experiments that were as cruel as they were dangerous. His existence was a harbinger of the horrors that lay within Apocalypse's empire. In this bleak reality, the Dark Beast operated out of a sprawling, high-tech laboratory concealed deep within a fortified complex. The laboratory was a nightmarish amalgamation of advanced technology and grotesque experimentation. The walls were lined with monitors and control panels, and the air was filled with the hum of machinery and the faint scent of chemicals. The environment was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the human suffering that occurred within its confines. The Dark Beast's experiments were aimed at furthering Apocalypse's agenda by creating new weapons and enhancing his forces. His work was driven by a ruthless desire to perfect the human and mutant forms, a twisted ambition that saw him pushing the boundaries of ethics and morality. His experiments were horrific, often involving the unwilling participation of captured mutants and humans. These subjects were subjected to a range of cruel procedures designed to enhance their powers or force them into compliance with Apocalypse's will. Among the most notorious of the Dark Beast's creations were his genetic hybrids. These hybrids were the result of combining mutant genes with various forms of genetic material, including that of animals and even inanimate objects. The result was a series of grotesque creatures, each one a monstrous fusion of different species. These hybrids were used by Apocalypse as shock troops, their enhanced abilities making them formidable opponents on the battlefield. They were often deployed in frontline combat, where their sheer physical prowess and brutal nature made them effective in crushing any form of resistance. The Dark Beast's work also extended to the development of advanced weaponry and technology. He created a range of devices designed to control or neutralize mutants, including inhibitors that could suppress their powers or even turn them against their allies. These devices were used extensively by Apocalypse's forces, further consolidating his control over the world. The Dark Beast's technological innovations were a significant factor in Apocalypse's ability to maintain his grip on power, as they allowed him to suppress any form of rebellion with ease. Within his laboratory, the Dark Beast was surrounded by a cadre of loyal scientists and technicians, all of whom were either too afraid or too indoctrinated to question his methods. These individuals worked tirelessly, often under harsh conditions, to support his experiments. They were kept in line by the Dark Beast's formidable presence and the constant threat of punishment for failure. The laboratory was a place of fear and obedience, where dissent was not tolerated and the consequences of failure were severe. The Dark Beast's influence extended beyond his laboratory. He was known for his ability to manipulate and control others, using his knowledge and resources to bend them to his will. This included not just his subordinates, but also other members of Apocalypse's regime. He was adept at playing political games, positioning himself as a crucial asset to Apocalypse while simultaneously undermining those who might pose a threat to his position. One of the key figures in the Dark Beast's manipulative schemes was the character of the Shadow King, a powerful psychic entity who had a vested interest in maintaining Apocalypse's rule. The Shadow King's abilities were a source of great concern for the Resistance, as his psychic powers allowed him to control and manipulate the minds of others. The Dark Beast and the Shadow King formed a precarious alliance, with the Dark Beast providing technological support in exchange for the Shadow King's aid in maintaining control over his creations. The Dark Beast's interactions with the X-Men were marked by a sense of personal animosity. Having once been a hero, the Dark Beast's fall into villainy was a source of deep regret for his former comrades. The X-Men saw him not just as a threat, but as a tragic figure, someone who had once fought for good but had been twisted by the very forces he had sought to combat. The battles between the X-Men and the Dark Beast were not just physical confrontations but also ideological ones, with the X-Men struggling to reconcile the monster he had become with the hero he once was. In one notable confrontation, the X-Men, led by Magneto, infiltrated the Dark Beast's laboratory in a daring raid. Their goal was to retrieve crucial information about Apocalypse's plans and to free any captives who might be held there. The raid was fraught with danger, as the Dark Beast had anticipated such an attack and had prepared numerous traps and defenses. The laboratory was a maze of obstacles, with automated security systems and genetic monstrosities serving as both guards and weapons. The battle within the laboratory was intense and brutal. The X-Men fought their way through hordes of hybrids and faced off against the Dark Beast's advanced weaponry. The Dark Beast himself was a formidable opponent, using his own enhanced abilities to fight off the intruders. His strength and agility were unmatched, and he used his knowledge of the laboratory's layout to his advantage, setting traps and using the environment to his benefit. Despite the challenges, the X-Men managed to breach the inner sanctum of the laboratory, where they confronted the Dark Beast directly. The encounter was a clash of ideologies and powers, with the Dark Beast defending his work with a mix of arrogance and madness. He viewed his experiments as a form of progress, a way to push the boundaries of science and create a new world order. For the X-Men, his actions were a perversion of the ideals they had once shared, a betrayal of everything they had fought for. The confrontation culminated in a dramatic showdown. The X-Men, using their combined powers and skills, managed to subdue the Dark Beast, though not without significant difficulty. The battle left the laboratory in ruins, with much of the Dark Beast's work destroyed or rendered inoperable. The X-Men had achieved their goal, but the victory was bittersweet. The damage done to the laboratory and the loss of crucial research were significant setbacks for the Resistance, and the Dark Beast's continued existence was a looming threat. Following the raid, the Dark Beast's fate was uncertain. His capture was a major blow to Apocalypse's regime, but his escape or potential return remained a possibility. The Resistance knew that as long as he was at large, the threat of his experiments and creations would persist. The Dark Beast's legacy was one of fear and dread, a reminder of the depths to which humanity could sink when consumed by ambition and power. In the broader context of the conflict, the Dark Beast represented a critical aspect of Apocalypse's rule. His scientific prowess and willingness to engage in horrific experiments made him a key player in maintaining Apocalypse's control over the world. His downfall was a significant victory for the Resistance, but the war was far from over. The Dark Beast's influence had left a lasting impact, and the scars of his work would be felt for years to come. Thus, the chapter of the Dark Beast in the saga of Apocalypse was one of darkness and depravity. It was a story of scientific hubris and moral decay, set against the backdrop of a world struggling to reclaim its lost hope. In the aftermath of the Dark Beast's fall, the Resistance continued its fight, knowing that every victory, no matter how small, brought them one step closer to liberating the world from Apocalypse's grasp. In the dark and fractured world under Apocalypse's dominion, there existed a hidden chapter of sorrow and struggle, the tale of the lost X-Men. This chapter unfolded in the shadows of a world dominated by despair, where the once proud and valiant team of X-Men had been scattered and largely forgotten. Their fate was a mix of tragedy, isolation, and the unyielding will to survive against the overwhelming odds of Apocalypse's rule. The story of the lost X-Men began with their capture and subsequent imprisonment. The once unified team had been torn apart by the sheer force of Apocalypse's armies. Each member was taken to separate facilities, spread across the vast empire that Apocalypse had forged. These facilities were not mere prisons. They were designed to break the spirit as much as to contain the body. Each cell was a harsh environment, equipped with advanced technology designed to nullify or suppress mutant powers. The walls were lined with inhibitors and dampeners, ensuring that even the most powerful mutants were rendered powerless and helpless. In their isolated confinement, the lost X-Men faced psychological and physical torment. The isolation was brutal, and the constant surveillance meant that there was no respite from the oppressive control of Apocalypse's regime. The team members were subjected to relentless interrogation and experimentation, as Apocalypse sought to extract any remaining secrets they might hold. The emotional strain was compounded by the knowledge that their comrades were scattered and similarly imprisoned, each one struggling with their own personal battles. Cyclops, the once steadfast leader of the X-Men, found himself in a particularly grim situation. His cell was a stark, featureless room, designed to isolate him from any external stimuli. The walls were lined with advanced technology that monitored his every move and restricted his abilities. Cyclops's mental resolve was tested daily as he faced the crushing reality of his captivity. The psychological torture inflicted upon him was relentless, aimed at breaking his spirit and forcing him to betray his allies. Yet, despite the immense pressure, Cyclops remained resolute. His thoughts were constantly on his team and their plight, fueling his determination to escape and reunite with them. Jean Grey, known for her formidable psychic abilities, was held in a different facility, one designed specifically to counteract her powers. Her cell was equipped with psychic inhibitors and nullification fields, which prevented her from using her telepathy or telekinesis. The isolation from her teammates and the constant mental intrusions from the guards took a heavy toll on her psyche. Jean's situation was dire, as the emotional and mental strain of her imprisonment began to erode her once unshakable resolve. Yet, she fought to maintain her inner strength, knowing that the key to her survival lay in holding on to hope and resisting the temptation to give in to despair. Wolverine, with his adamantium skeleton and healing factor, was held in a high-security facility designed to withstand his formidable abilities. His cell was reinforced with layers of security, including energy dampeners and physical restraints. Despite the advanced technology used to contain him, Wolverine's indomitable will and healing factor allowed him to endure the harsh conditions. His captivity was marked by constant attempts to escape, each one thwarted by the relentless guards and the sophisticated security measures in place. Wolverine's determination to break free was matched only by his desire to reunite with his lost comrades and continue the fight against Apocalypse. Storm, one of the most powerful mutants with control over the elements, faced her own unique challenges. Her imprisonment took place in an environment designed to suppress her powers, with weather control systems that neutralized her abilities. The loss of her powers and the confinement in a stark, oppressive cell was a heavy blow to her spirit. Storm's leadership qualities and inner strength were tested as she struggled to maintain hope amidst the crushing isolation. Her thoughts often turned to her teammates, and she drew strength from the memories of their past victories and the belief that they would one day be reunited. Beast, who had once been a symbol of intellect and heroism, now found himself in a grim situation of his own. His cell was filled with advanced technology designed to stifle his scientific mind and physical prowess. The dark irony of his situation was not lost on him, as he faced the reality of his captivity with a mixture of determination and resignation. Beast's intellect was a crucial asset, and his knowledge of science and technology was continually sought after by Apocalypse's forces. Despite the conditions, he remained focused on finding a way to escape and aid his fellow X-Men in their struggle. Nightcrawler, known for his teleportation abilities, was held in a facility designed to counteract his powers. The cell was equipped with teleportation dampeners and energy fields that prevented him from using his unique abilities. The constant struggle against the suppression of his powers and the isolation from his friends took a toll on Nightcrawler's morale. Yet, his faith and belief in the ultimate victory of good over evil kept him grounded. He used his time in captivity to reflect on his past and plan for the day when he would escape and rejoin his comrades in the fight against Apocalypse. Rogue, with her power-absorbing abilities, faced her own set of challenges. Her cell was designed to neutralize her powers, leaving her vulnerable and isolated. The loss of her abilities was a crushing blow, but Rogue's determination and resilience remained intact. She used her time in captivity to strategize and look for potential weaknesses in her confinement. Her thoughts were often focused on her fellow X-Men and the hope of reuniting with them to continue their fight against Apocalypse's tyranny. As time went on, the lost X-Men faced numerous trials, each one a test of their strength, resilience, and hope. Their individual struggles were a testament to their enduring spirit and their unwavering commitment to the cause. Despite the oppressive conditions and the constant threat of death or betrayal, they never lost sight of their ultimate goal: to escape from Apocalypse's clutches and restore hope to the world. The story of the lost X-Men was not just one of captivity and suffering. It was also a tale of hope and determination. Each member of the team, despite their dire circumstances, held onto the belief that they would one day be freed and reunited. Their resolve was a beacon of light in a world consumed by darkness, a reminder of the strength and courage that lay within them. The chapter of the Lost X-Men was a crucial part of the larger saga, highlighting the personal struggles and sacrifices made by the heroes in their fight against Apocalypse. Their captivity was a significant challenge, but their endurance and hope were key factors in their eventual escape and the continuation of their struggle against the tyrannical rule of Apocalypse. In the end, the story of the Lost X-Men was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope in the face of overwhelming adversity. In the final act of the tumultuous saga, the world trembled as the fall of Apocalypse unfolded, a dramatic confrontation that would determine the fate of the universe. The once unyielding ruler, whose iron grip had darkened the world, faced an impending reckoning. The climax of this epic battle was not merely a struggle of might, but a collision of ideologies, hopes, and the relentless spirit of resistance. The story began with the Resistance preparing for their final push against Apocalypse. After enduring countless hardships and losses, they had managed to regroup and strengthen their forces. Their unity was a beacon of hope, rallying mutants and humans alike to their cause. The time had come to strike at the heart of Apocalypse's power and end his reign of terror once and for all. The Resistance's plan was audacious and dangerous. They aimed to assault Apocalypse's stronghold, a colossal fortress that loomed over the ravaged landscape. This fortress was a symbol of his power, a monolithic structure bristling with advanced defenses and guarded by legions of loyal enforcers. The fortress was not only a physical barrier but also a psychological one, representing the overwhelming might and control that Apocalypse had wielded over the world. To breach this fortress, the Resistance had to navigate a complex network of defenses and traps. The fortress was equipped with an array of technological barriers, including energy shields, automated turrets, and psychic inhibitors designed to thwart any intrusions. The Resistance's approach was carefully coordinated, with each member playing a critical role in overcoming these obstacles. They faced fierce opposition from Apocalypse's forces, including the genetically modified hybrids and elite soldiers who were tasked with protecting their master's domain. As the battle raged outside, within the fortress, Apocalypse prepared for the inevitable confrontation. His confidence was palpable, a reflection of his unshakable belief in his own invincibility. The final confrontation was not just a physical battle, but a test of wills. A clash between Apocalypse's vision of a world dominated by strength and the Resistance's fight for freedom and justice. The heart of the fortress was a grand chamber, an imposing room filled with advanced technology and dark, brooding decor. This chamber served as Apocalypse's command center, where he orchestrated his plans and exerted his control over his vast empire. It was here that the final confrontation would unfold, a battle that would determine the fate of the world. As the Resistance breached the outer defenses and fought their way into the fortress, the tension reached a fever pitch. The X-Men, along with their allies, fought through waves of enemies, each step bringing them closer to their ultimate goal. The battle was fierce and unrelenting, with every member of the Resistance pushing themselves to their limits. They faced formidable challenges, including the last line of defense set by Apocalypse himself. Inside the Grand Chamber, Apocalypse awaited the arrival of his adversaries. His appearance was imposing, a towering figure clad in dark, armored attire that reflected his immense power. He exuded a sense of authority and menace, a stark contrast to the defiant spirit of the Resistance. Apocalypse's confidence was evident, but there was also a growing sense of tension, a recognition that the battle they were about to engage in would be decisive. The Resistance's assault on the chamber was met with fierce resistance. Apocalypse's elite guards and powerful minions engaged the intruders with ruthless efficiency. The chamber became a battlefield of chaos and destruction, as the X-Men and their allies fought against overwhelming odds. Each member of the Resistance demonstrated their unique abilities and fought with unwavering determination, knowing that the outcome of this battle would shape the future of their world. Amidst the chaos, the battle between Apocalypse and the key figures of the Resistance was particularly intense. Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Storm, and the other X-Men confronted Apocalypse directly, their confrontation a clash of titanic proportions. Apocalypse unleashed his formidable powers, a display of raw strength and cosmic energy that shook the very foundation of the chamber. The X-Men, though battered and exhausted, fought with everything they had, driven by the knowledge that the fate of their world rested on their shoulders. The fight was not only a test of physical strength, but also a battle of strategy and willpower. Apocalypse, accustomed to dominance, was challenged by the unity and resolve of the Resistance. The X-Men used their combined abilities to counteract Apocalypse's attacks, employing a blend of tactics and teamwork to overcome his formidable defenses. Their struggle was a testament to their resilience and the strength of their convictions. As the battle raged on, the turning point came when the Resistance managed to breach Apocalypse's inner sanctum. The chamber's defenses were overwhelmed, and the tide of the battle began to shift. The X-Men and their allies pressed their advantage, pushing deeper into the heart of Apocalypse's stronghold. The conflict reached its climax as Apocalypse, realizing the gravity of his situation, unleashed his full power in a final, desperate bid to secure his dominance. In the midst of the turmoil, a critical moment arrived when Jean Grey, utilizing her immense psychic powers, managed to penetrate Apocalypse's defenses and confront his very essence. Her telepathic assault was a direct challenge to his control, targeting the core of his being. This psychic confrontation was both a literal and symbolic clash, representing the struggle between Apocalypse's vision of absolute power and the Resistance's fight for freedom. The climax of the battle saw Apocalypse's power faltering. The combined efforts of the X-Men and their allies began to overwhelm him. The very forces that had once seemed invincible were now being pushed back, as the Resistance's determination and unity proved stronger than Apocalypse's might. The chamber, once a symbol of his power, became the stage for his downfall. In a final, dramatic moment, Apocalypse was defeated. The once omnipotent ruler fell, his control over the world shattered. The fall of Apocalypse was not just a physical defeat, but a profound victory for the Resistance. It marked the end of an era of tyranny and the beginning of a new chapter in the struggle for a better world. The aftermath of the battle was a time of reflection and rebuilding. The fall of Apocalypse had a profound impact on the world, and the Resistance began the challenging process of restoring hope and order. The X-Men, having faced immense trials and sacrifices, emerged as heroes and symbols of resilience. Their victory was a testament to their strength and their unwavering commitment to the ideals of justice and freedom. In the wake of Apocalypse's defeat, the world began to heal. The scars of his rule would take time to mend, but the fall of the tyrant was a turning point. The Resistance's victory was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the spirit of defiance and unity could overcome the greatest of adversities. The chapter of the fall of Apocalypse was not just an end but a beginning, a new dawn for a world that had been rescued from the brink of despair. In the aftermath of the climactic battle that ended Apocalypse's reign, the fates of Rogue and Magneto became central to the evolving narrative of a world trying to rebuild and find its new path forward. Their stories, intertwined with the broader struggle, were marked by personal sacrifice, redemption, and the complex interplay of power and responsibility. Rogue, once a powerful mutant with the ability to absorb others' powers and memories, had faced immense trials during the tumultuous period of Apocalypse's rule. Her capture and subsequent imprisonment had been a harrowing ordeal. Held in a facility designed to suppress her abilities, Rogue was isolated from her comrades, struggling with the loss of her powers and the weight of her own inner demons. The challenges she faced in captivity had left deep scars, both physical and emotional. Yet, her resolve remained strong, driven by a desire to contribute to the fight against the oppressive regime and to reunite with her fellow X-Men. When the Resistance finally managed to breach Apocalypse's stronghold, Rogue's role in the final battle was a significant turning point. Despite the suppression of her powers, she demonstrated remarkable bravery and determination. Her involvement was not only a testament to her resilience, but also a symbol of the hope and unity that defined the Resistance. Rogue fought alongside her teammates with a fierce determination, her presence a crucial part of the struggle against Apocalypse's forces. As the battle drew to a close and Apocalypse was defeated, Rogue's fate became intertwined with the aftermath of the conflict. The victory was bittersweet, and the task of rebuilding the world and addressing the consequences of the long period of tyranny lay ahead. Rogue's journey in the post-apocalypse world was one of healing and reconciliation. She grappled with the emotional and psychological impact of her captivity, working to come to terms with her experiences and find her place in the new world that was emerging. Meanwhile, Magneto, a figure whose complex relationship with the X-Men had been marked by both conflict and collaboration, faced his own set of challenges and transformations. Magneto's role in the final battle was pivotal. His immense power and strategic acumen had been crucial in the struggle against Apocalypse. As the leader of the mutant forces, he played a key role in orchestrating the final assault on Apocalypse's stronghold. His leadership and influence were instrumental in rallying the Resistance and guiding them through the perilous confrontation. In the aftermath of Apocalypse's defeat, Magneto's position was both powerful and precarious. His actions had solidified his role as a key figure in the new world order that was taking shape. Yet, his past actions and his complex relationship with both the X-Men and the broader mutant community left him in a position where his future was uncertain. Magneto faced the challenge of navigating the shifting political and social landscape, working to find a balance between his own ideals and the needs of the new world. Rogue and Magneto's fates were not merely individual stories, but reflections of the broader themes of redemption and transformation. For Rogue, the journey was one of personal healing and finding a new sense of purpose. Her experiences had forged her into a symbol of resilience and strength, and she sought to use her abilities and experiences to contribute to the rebuilding of a world that had been ravaged by tyranny. Magneto's path was one of navigating the complex dynamics of power and responsibility. His leadership in the final battle had earned him both respect and scrutiny. As the world moved forward, Magneto had to grapple with the implications of his actions and the role he would play in shaping the future. His journey was marked by a quest for redemption and a search for a new direction, both for himself and for the mutant community. Together, Rogue and Magneto's stories were intertwined with the broader narrative of the world emerging from the shadow of Apocalypse. Their personal journeys reflected the larger themes of hope, redemption, and the struggle to create a better future in the wake of a devastating conflict. Their fates were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring quest for justice and reconciliation in a world that had been forever changed by the forces of tyranny and resistance. As the saga of Apocalypse reached its zenith, the world stood on the precipice of a final, decisive clash. The air was thick with tension, as the forces of the resistance prepared for the ultimate confrontation with their tyrannical ruler. The final conflict was not just a battle, but a culmination of years of strife, hope, and sacrifice, shaping the destiny of the world itself. The final conflict unfolded within the massive and foreboding stronghold of Apocalypse, a towering fortress that had long been the symbol of his domination. The Resistance, having gathered their strength and resources, launched a full-scale assault on this fortress. It was a desperate and determined push to end Apocalypse's reign and reclaim the future. The Resistance's approach to the fortress was marked by intense combat and strategic maneuvers. The outer defenses of the stronghold were formidable, designed to repel any intruders with relentless efficiency. These defenses included energy barriers, automated weapons, and a host of loyal enforcers who would stop at nothing to protect their master. The Resistance forces, consisting of mutants and allied humans, coordinated their attack with precision, overcoming these obstacles with a combination of power, strategy, and sheer will. As the Resistance fought their way through the fortress, they encountered a series of increasingly dangerous challenges. The inner sanctum of the stronghold was heavily fortified, with each layer of defense more daunting than the last. The Resistance had to contend with not only physical barriers, but also psychic and technological traps designed to neutralize their abilities and hinder their progress. Despite these obstacles, the Resistance pressed on, their resolve unshaken by the obstacles before them. The battle inside the fortress was chaotic and fierce. The Resistance's assault was met with the full force of Apocalypse's elite guards and powerful minions. These adversaries were not only skilled fighters, but also equipped with advanced technology and genetic enhancements, making them formidable opponents. The clash was a spectacular display of power, with explosions, energy blasts, and fierce combat unfolding in every corner of the fortress. As the Resistance pushed deeper into the stronghold, they faced a critical turning point. The heart of the fortress was a grand chamber, an imposing and darkened space filled with advanced machinery and a palpable sense of menace. It was here that Apocalypse awaited his adversaries, his presence a looming shadow over the battlefield. The chamber was a focal point of his power, a place where he had orchestrated his plans and exerted his control over the world. Apocalypse, a towering and menacing figure, was ready for the final confrontation. His confidence was unshakable, his belief in his own invincibility evident in his demeanor. He had prepared for this moment, knowing that the Resistance's assault was the culmination of a long and arduous struggle. Apocalypse was not only a physical threat, but also a symbol of the oppressive rule that had cast a shadow over the world. The final confrontation was both a literal and symbolic battle, a clash between the forces of tyranny and the struggle for freedom. The Resistance's forces, including key figures like Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Storm, and others, faced Apocalypse directly. Their confrontation was a dramatic and intense battle, marked by the full display of their abilities and the raw power of their adversary. Cyclops unleashed his optic blasts with precision. Jean Grey wielded her psychic powers with determination. Wolverine fought with his adamantium claws and unyielding ferocity, and Storm called upon the elements to aid her in the fight. Apocalypse's response was equally formidable. He wielded his vast powers with devastating effect, unleashing energy blasts, manipulating matter, and deploying a range of advanced technologies to combat the Resistance. The battle was a fierce and unrelenting struggle, with each side pushing their abilities to the limit. The Grand Chamber became a battleground of chaos, a place where the fate of the world would be decided. Amidst the conflict, the Resistance faced a series of critical challenges. Apocalypse's ability to adapt and counter their attacks was a significant obstacle, as he used his vast knowledge and resources to stay one step ahead. The Resistance had to rely on their unity, strategy, and resilience to overcome these challenges. The battle was not only a test of physical strength, but also of endurance and tactical acumen. As the battle reached its climax, the turning point came when the Resistance managed to breach Apocalypse's inner defenses. The Chamber, once a symbol of his power, began to show signs of vulnerability. The tide of the battle shifted as the Resistance's forces pressed their advantage, overcoming Apocalypse's defenses and pushing deeper into the heart of his stronghold. The final confrontation was a dramatic and intense moment, with both sides fighting with everything they had. In a dramatic and decisive moment, the Resistance managed to gain the upper hand. The combined efforts of the X-Men and their allies proved too much for Apocalypse. The once omnipotent ruler, who had seemed invincible, was now facing defeat. The Grand Chamber, which had been a symbol of his dominance, became the stage for his fall. The final moments of the conflict were marked by a climactic confrontation between Apocalypse and the key figures of the Resistance. The battle reached its zenith as Apocalypse, realizing the gravity of his situation, unleashed his full power in a desperate bid to turn the tide. His final assault was a display of raw energy and force, but it was ultimately countered by the determination and resilience of the Resistance. In the end, Apocalypse was defeated. The tyrant who had cast a dark shadow over the world was brought down by the combined efforts of the Resistance. His fall was a profound moment, signaling the end of an era of oppression and the beginning of a new chapter. The Grand Chamber, once a symbol of his power, became a place of victory for the Resistance. The aftermath of the final conflict was a time of reflection and rebuilding. The world that had been ravaged by Apocalypse's rule began to heal, and the Resistance's victory was a beacon of hope. The X-Men and their allies emerged as heroes, their triumph a testament to their strength, unity, and determination. The fall of Apocalypse marked a turning point, a new beginning for a world that had been forever changed by the forces of tyranny and resistance. The final conflict was not just the end of a battle, but the beginning of a new era. The victory over Apocalypse was a triumph of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the spirit of defiance and unity could overcome the greatest of adversities. The world that emerged from the shadow of Apocalypse's rule was one that held the promise of renewal and the possibility of a brighter future. In the wake of Apocalypse's downfall, the world stood at a crossroads, its landscape scarred by years of tyranny and conflict. The aftermath of the battle was both a time of profound reflection and the beginning of a challenging process of rebuilding and redefining a new era. The world that had been plunged into darkness was now faced with the task of emerging from the shadow of Apocalypse's rule and forging a path toward a hopeful future. The immediate aftermath of the final battle was marked by a period of intense activity and reconstruction. The stronghold of Apocalypse, once a symbol of his omnipotence, lay in ruins. The fortress had been a central hub of his oppressive regime, and its destruction was both a strategic and symbolic victory for the resistance. However, the devastation left in its wake was considerable, and the process of cleaning up and rebuilding began almost immediately. The X-Men, along with their allies, took on a central role in the efforts to restore order and stability. They worked tirelessly to assist in the recovery of affected areas, providing aid and support to those who had suffered under Apocalypse's rule. The aftermath was a time of immense responsibility, as the heroes who had fought so valiantly against tyranny now faced the daunting task of helping to heal a fractured world. Rogue, having played a crucial role in the final battle, began to address the personal and collective healing that was required. Her own journey of recovery was marked by deep introspection and a commitment to using her abilities and experiences to contribute positively to the new world. She engaged in efforts to support those who had been affected by the conflict, using her powers to assist in healing and helping to rebuild communities. Rogue's presence was a symbol of resilience and hope, her actions reflecting her desire to aid in the restoration of a world that had been ravaged by years of oppression. Magneto, whose actions during the final battle had solidified his position as a key figure in the New World Order, faced a complex and delicate role in the aftermath. His leadership and strategic acumen had been instrumental in the defeat of Apocalypse, but his past actions and affiliations presented both opportunities and challenges as he sought to navigate the shifting political landscape. Magneto's influence was significant, and he worked to leverage his position to help guide the reconstruction efforts and address the lingering issues that had emerged from the conflict. His efforts were marked by a focus on creating a more equitable and just world, even as he grappled with the weight of his own legacy. As the world began the process of healing, the focus shifted to addressing the broader implications of the conflict. The global political landscape was forever altered by the events that had transpired. Nations and societies had to grapple with the consequences of the long period of tyranny and the massive upheaval caused by the final battle. The Resistance's victory brought a new sense of possibility, but it also required a concerted effort to establish new systems of governance, justice, and cooperation. The X-Men, having emerged as symbols of hope and resilience, continued their work as champions of justice and protectors of a world striving to rebuild. Their role was not only to address immediate needs, but also to help guide the world toward a future where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. They engaged in efforts to promote understanding and cooperation among different factions, and to address the lingering threats and challenges that had emerged from the conflict. The legacy of the battle against Apocalypse was one of both triumph and reflection. The defeat of the tyrant marked the end of an era of oppression, but it also highlighted the need for vigilance and ongoing efforts to ensure that the hard-won victory was not in vain. The heroes who had fought so valiantly were now faced with the responsibility of shaping a new world, one that would be defined by principles of justice, equality, and hope. In the broader context, the events of the conflict and the aftermath had a profound impact on the mutant community and the world at large. The struggle against Apocalypse had demonstrated the power of unity and resilience, and the importance of standing up against tyranny and oppression. The legacy of the battle was a testament to the strength and determination of those who had fought for a better future. The world that emerged from the shadow of Apocalypse's rule was one that held the promise of renewal and transformation. The heroes who had played pivotal roles in the conflict continued to work toward a future where the lessons of the past would guide their actions. The challenges were considerable, But the hope and determination that had defined the struggle against apocalypse were now the driving forces behind the efforts to build a better world. In summary, the aftermath of the final conflict was a period of intense reflection, rebuilding, and transformation. The defeat of Apocalypse marked the end of an era of tyranny and the beginning of a new chapter defined by hope, resilience, and the ongoing quest for justice. The X-Men and their allies played a crucial role in guiding the world through this challenging time, their legacy a testament to their strength, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to creating a brighter future for all.